Sorry for the delay, but some of the handouts came in just before or just at the start of this meeting. So we tried to give my aide a little chance to get done with those. All right, and I'll call the committee to order. And the first on the is the YDC Claims Administrator. Justice. Get the red button on, and you're good to go.
Okay. Uh, Good afternoon. For the record, my name is John Broderick. I'm the administrator of the fund. And next to me is Jen Foley, who's general counsel to our operation. And it's a pleasure to be with you. We submitted in advance, and I have a copy with me, a number of documents that I think outline kind of what we do and how we do it. And more recently, some data-specific entries about how many cases we've handled, how many cases we've settled, how many cases the Attorney General's office has settled outside the fund. And so that's kind of our case. Jen Foley has put together and I think passed out what would be the equivalent of a PowerPoint presentation that would provide a good overview of what we do, how we do it, what standards we apply, and the like. And if that's of any interest to the committee, I could turn it over to Jen, and she could take you through that. Mr. Chairman?
It's your presentation. It sounds like you would like us to hear it, so go ahead.
All right, thank you.
I'll give hands to you, and I'll take the mic. Kind of a cozy atmosphere.
This one?
Yes, yep.
Okay.
Good afternoon. I think I've met most people here, some not, maybe from Joint Fiscal. So again, Jen Foley, General Counsel for YDC Claims Administration. So I'll be brief going through these slides, and most of this information is in the materials, but it kind of gives a high-level overview. So page 2 of the slide deck shows you that the fund statute 21M11A is actually under the Department of Justice as one of its functions. And there's some language highlighted there about establishing the Attorney General as the fund administrator and some of his role in that. Slide 3 goes a little bit deeper into the statute where John T. Broderick Jr. comes into play. He was appointed as YDC Claims Administrator. Specifically, you can see that in Section 3, and it's in Section 3 that brings the judicial branch into the settlement fund. It's a multi-agency function, and actually our employees are part of the judicial branch. But the judicial branch does not have access to our claim files, and it is not part of processing our claim files at all, although it does give some infrastructure support, such as posting on our website and things like that. Slide 4 gives you a picture of our operations at a high level. So we refer to ourselves as the claims administration. We're essentially an extension of John Broderick as the administrator. So this is how he has designed his team to assist him in his responsibilities. So you have the administrator. You now have an assistant administrator, Diane Nicolosi. You have 2 hearing teams that function weekly. You have 4 operations staff that are employed by the judicial branch, but again, we operate separate from the court system itself. We have a significant consultant firm who assists us in all sorts of capacities, Affiliated Monitors Incorporated, and we also have a vendor contract for a claims management system that handles our e-filing portal. And so you have a summary there of who are our full-time employees, our part-time employees, and consultants. Slide 5 basically gives you a picture, and this is actually right on our website, as to the 2 methods where resolutions and settlements occur. Again, this is following the statute. The first avenue of settlement resolution is a claim has intake. We make sure it's administratively complete and has all the necessary documents as approved, as required under legal documents that were approved by Joint Fiscal. and it proceeds all the way to stage 3, a resolution proceeding hearing, and then a decision by the administrator. Then there's on the bottom of this page shows you essentially a second track that runs simultaneously, and that is direct settlements that occur with the Attorney General's office. So the statute lays out 2 ways for settlement. Slide 6, when a claim is resolved, not all claims are resolved with awards. Some have a disposition date where they're withdrawn or they're closed for other reasons. But if they do close with an award settlement that is accepted by the claimant, then it's closed for claims processing by the administrator and his staff, and it proceeds to payment processing, which is handled by the Attorney General's office as the fund administrator who works with other state agencies, I believe the Department of Administrative Services, to make sure that the checks are getting to the claimants. So payment processing is handled by the Attorney General's office and the assistance that they receive. Slide 7 gets you into the evaluation of a claim. So I won't go into it in detail, just want to give you the major pieces. One major piece, of course, is eligibility and verification. We'd be happy to walk through some of that a little bit, but we gave you some high-level information as to how we review claims for eligibility and verify them.
I think most of the senators here were involved in legislation.
Oh,
so-
great. Okay, super. So then slide 8, in the next few slides, basically are pictures of the valuation guidelines that Joint Fiscal approved. So you can see, and I'll go through these slides real quick. I know we have slide 8 basically tells you the grid for sexual abuse. Again, it has to be compensable sexual abuse under the statute. Slide 9 shows you a picture of the grid for valuing other abuse that's non-sexual abuse in nature. Slide 10 gives you basically what we see for what the grid then requires a frequency multiplier to be applied. Again, this is a grid that was approved and is in play that the administrator, the Attorney General's office, and claimants are required to follow. So that is the next step, is frequency multiplier. Slide 11, there's actually one type of abuse that has a little bit of a different calculation to it. Other abuse, category F, which is unlawful restraint or being placed in isolated confinement, is a per day count that the statute put in place for $300 a day. So that one's evaluated just a little bit differently under the guidelines. Slide 12 then tells you once the hearing teams and under the administrator decides compensable abuse and frequency, then they move to aggravating factors. So there's again a grid that is tied to the legal documents that show you the aggravating factors that are permitted to be part of the valuation and the dollars that are attached to that. Slide 13 gives you, it's a different aggravating factor grid for other abuse. So for other abuse compensable, this is the grid that the administrator and his teams abide by. Slide 14 then gets into mitigating or exceptional factors, and all of this is under the valuation guidelines, a legal document. I just wanted to give you a picture of them. These are the different mitigating or exceptional factors that the administrator reviews. So I'll give you an example. Problems of proof, second one down on the page. To the extent the available evidence that was provided as supporting documents for a claim or as part of the testimony under oath, that the administrator, his hearing team see as not quite as much proof as you would expect. That also is taken into consideration in terms of figuring out the final award amount. Slide 15 then gives you the statutory caps. And the statutory caps under the guidelines for evaluation break it down in 3 ways. I won't read them through you, but I just point you to them, how they are described and how the administrator, what he's required to follow in terms of ultimately what caps must apply. So even if a compensable abuse might show, let's say for other abuse, $1 million of other abuse, he would be required to apply a cap of $250,000. That's just an example. So these caps show the administrator and his team what he's bound by. So that gets you through the valuation and how we come up with award amounts. And slide 16 is really to give you a picture of where are we right now. I will just remind folks, you probably already know it, but the filing period concludes on June 30th of this year. It's been a 2.5-year filing period. It was originally 2 years, but the legislature determined to allow an extra 6 months. So that time period has not yet concluded, but we have been giving notice to the outside world that closure is coming. And we are going to be firm with those deadlines. So this shows you where we are now as of the close of the most recent quarterly report, March 31st data, about 1,100 claims filed to date. 296 of them have been resolved with an award. 31 of the claims have either been dismissed or withdrawn for different reasons. 808 claims, therefore, are pending, and that is a rising number. Like I said, the filing period continues. We don't control how many come in, but we are in touch with about 30 law firms to get a sense as to how many may be coming from each of the firms. So then we go to slide 17. This is just the next two slides are just a snapshot from the most recent quarterly report to show you of the 296 claims that have resolved so far, how did they do that? So to date, this is from the January 1st of 2023 to the reporting period, 153 of those were resolved through direct settlement with the Attorney General's office. We receive that paperwork and review it before it can be closed and proceed to payment processing. 129 have gone through the resolution proceeding hearings and have resolved that way. And then we've most recently, in collaboration with the Attorney General's office and Claims Counsel, developed another approach where if the Attorney General's office and Claims Counsel have agreed on the award amount under the guidelines, but they have not agreed on the payment terms, such as percentage of legal fees or number of years for payout, they submit that paperwork to the administrator to decide those open items and issue a decision. So that's another way that we're seeking to streamline the resolution process. Slide 18, we get this question actually quite a bit as to what might be the average award or how much is going in certain categories. And actually Joint Fiscal had asked us to show a range. So we expanded the quarterly report to be more transparent or give more information. So you can see, for the Attorney General direct settlements as an example, how many of those that resolved were in a settlement up to $500,000, or in the middle category, 500 to 1.5, or in excess of 1.5. And it shows you for the other categories as well, so you can get a sense. I will let you know that an average week of what resolution decisions go out the door, there's really, in some ways, no average week. Some weeks we get 30,000, 80,000, 150,000, a million. Other weeks we might get 900,000, 1.5. We've only had 2 claims so far that have gone over the 1.5. So that even the category, the range that shows settlement up to 500,000, there's a lot of range in there. That's where you might see some award decisions go out that might be $7,500, where a claimant has decided to withdraw, and that's their choice if they don't want to accept that. So then that slide 19 gives you a picture of our budget. And this, I think, has been a point of confusion a little bit about what our budget is versus the settlement fund as a whole, its appropriations budget. So through a memorandum of understanding that the judicial branch has in place with the Attorney General's office that was put in place before the administrator was appointed, essentially the judicial branch pays our operation costs out of its budget or however it budgets for it, and then gets reimbursed from the judicial branch to get a check from the fund to pay those operation costs. We take a budget for our operation costs. We give that budget to the Attorney General's office, who approves it, to the Attorney General himself, actually, who reviews it and approves it. And then the judicial branch makes sure that all of our operations are abiding by that budget. And I'm really pleased to say that in the last 2 years, we've been historically under budget, and we see that as remaining in place for the rest of this fiscal year. We have given a proposed budget for the next 2 fiscal years to the Attorney General's office. It is under review. but it's about 2.5 million a year for our operations costs as we are expecting them to be. Again, we expect to hold our consultants to their contract cap all the way to a point that we will continue to have to not exceed the budget and certainly not get close to the budget. And that's what we're always aiming to do. We work close with our consultants that way. So that's a picture of our operation budget. But then slide 20, I think this has also caused some confusion. So before the Administrator Broderick was appointed, the Department of Justice needed to come up with a settlement fund, and I think that there might be some folks here, or definitely folks in state government, that could answer this more specifically as to how this classification system with the Department of Administrative Services was developed. Where our operations lie is under line 049584910, interagency payments to the AOC. That's, as I said, the judicial branch pays for operation costs. They submit a quarterly invoice to the Attorney General's office to receive payment under the fund, and so that is where our operations costs come into play. In terms of all of these other lines, our operations have nothing to do with how those numbers are calculated, arrived at. I had a really great walkthrough with Michael Kane and also with Allison Cook a couple weeks ago to have a little bit more understanding on this. But if anybody needs to understand this particular classification line, I would point folks in another direction. I'm not the one to answer that. Then slide 21, which is our last slide, and I appreciate your patience. This is a picture of current appropriations for the fund itself. So 165 million has been put in place for appropriations so far. 160 million of that was done through legislation. First, 100 million was put in place when the legislation first came on the books in 2022. And then a second appropriations was put in place last year of 60 million. For reasons that did not involve our operations, 75 million was not put in place at that time, 60 million was, and so we have been operating accordingly. And then just last week, another $5 million was approved by Governor and Council, which had been originally approved by Joint Fiscal in March. So we are working with 165 million. With that 165 million, and by the way, we work very closely with Tom Kempfer at the Attorney General's office to make sure that all numbers are staying within appropriations. About 23 million to 24 million is remaining. The fund administrator has wisely said there needs to be a buffer in place. So we also, that 23 to 24 million is not fully available for continued resolution activity. Some of it needs to be reserved for making sure our operations continue. So then my understanding is that there's an estimated 26 million at a base minimum needed for the next fiscal year 26-27 cycle, which relates to committed installments for already resolved claims. There's 808 pending claims that need resolution of some sort. And so whatever additional appropriations come will be attributed towards resolving claims, whether it's through hearings or through the direct settlements with the Attorney General's office under the funds. We have identified repeatedly that we see 150 million as the amount to put into appropriations for the next 2 years. I'm sure it's a difficult decision as to how the state would balance all of that, but we rely on what the statute put in place, 75 million per year. Given where we are in claims processing, that there's 808 pending and that the filing period has not concluded, we have no idea how much of that 150 million would be spent, but we do see it as abiding by what the statute set in place. One final item that we would make note of, and really as a recommendation, and maybe if there's time, if you have the ability to speak to it, and we don't have time today, maybe that we could come back, is opening up more channels to speed up resolutions. Mediation we see as an excellent channel to consider. And I don't know if you wanted to speak a little bit about that in terms of what you've seen and why you would suggest remediation.
We're probably already gone over our time, so you can stop me at any moment, I know. Thank you, Senator.
Fortunately, I'm the timekeeper, so.
All right.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Senator. My goal for this fund, if it's continued, and it should be continued, in my view, having done this work for 2 years, having sat in those rooms, having heard these people, and the legislation, as I've said many times, is ingenious. I mean that sincerely. It's trauma-informed and victim-centered in a way courtrooms are never intended to be. But I do know also that we need to speed the process. And we could hold hearings on every case as we've been doing because that's the format we've followed. And I would still suggest we do that at the election of claimants. But I also think if we're going to get through this in our lifetime, we need to have a pretty robust mediation part of this process that claimants could elect to go into. My guess is a lot of them would elect to do that. And that would allow the state and the claimants' counsel to decide if they want to settle it. It wouldn't be coming from me, but we would, or some third party would act as a facilitator for resolution. Again, it keeps these cases out of the court. It's done in a way that's respectful, and I think it will hasten the resolution of these claims. And so if the Senate is interested in that, we can provide more detail. But I do think that something needs to change. I also think, and this is not a criticism, trust me on that, I also think the Attorney General's office, which for the first 18 months to 20 months have been settling, you can see that, a fair number of cases. In the last many months, that's dropped way down. And I don't know why. It's not a criticism, it's just comment. I think they need to be a little more engaged too in resolving cases. In terms of what we're doing with our two teams, one of our teams is hearing cases today. I'll be hearing cases again this week. I heard some on Friday. So we're pretty busy, but I know the system works, and the best way to gauge that is how many people accept what we decide. And the last thing I would say is the cost to the state to try these cases. I might suggest you ask the Attorney General for a budget for that, to try 800 sexual abuse cases. I can't imagine what that would be. I know as ours, it's a lot cheaper. And
We need to stick to your budget. And,
I'm sorry?
We need to stick to your budget. I'll take care of the Attorney General.
No, I'm sure you will, Mr. Chairman. I'm not criticizing you. I'm just saying it'd be interesting. That because I think the value of our fund is it's cost effective, it's trauma informed, and it's resolving cases that never make their way into the public light, which is a good thing unless claimants want to talk about them, and as you imagine, they don't generally want to do that. So with that, I don't have anything else, Mr. Chairman. If there are any questions, we'd be happy to take them.
One thing I want to note for the committee, page 21 of her presentation, bullet 3. Without settling any other claims between now and the end of June, 26 million is what is needed in the biennium just to pay for that. The House right now's budget of $10 million in each of the 2 years is not sufficient to do that. And again, this number may grow depending upon any settlements that are done between now and the end of the year. Questions from the senators? Senator Waters, I saw you first, then Senator Rosenwald.
Partly a clarification, maybe for you, Mr. Chairman, or for these folks. The $26 million, how much of that could be covered by the 23 to 24 you have, which I guess your buffer is a certain amount, but
Yes, it's
or is
right.
this 26 million in addition to
Yes.
the amount that you have aside from the buffer?
The Attorney General, Senator, has told us of the 23 and 24 million that you see there, that we need to hold back 10 million as a buffer. I don't think he was saying that so we could pay the years and the claims outstanding in 26 and 27, but you'd have to ask him. If we had to take the 23 or 24 million today and hold it for those purposes, we would have to shut our operation down at 5 o'clock today.
Yeah, thank you.
we
What I'm
could-
just trying to get at is that
Follow up?
Yeah, if I could, I'm just trying to, let's take the 10 million out for your buffer. Does that mean that there's then 13 million, which could be part of that, that is, so that we'd actually need 13 million new rather than 26 million new? Is that,
I don't, I guess the answer to your question, as far as I understand it, would be yes.
okay,
That if they could use that, they could use that to pay for a portion of the claims that we are due for the next 10 years going to be paying out.
one more follow-up if I could. I couldn't quite understand about the facilitator. Could that be covered in your existing administration budget, or are you asking for additional funds in the
No,
administration?
I'm not asking for additional funds, Senator. The way the statute anticipated it, if I decided to appoint a fact facilitator to be someone outside of our office, they would presumably then conduct an investigation, which might include a meeting with the claimant, a transcript of that meeting, which would be shared. But once they get the assignment, they then have 90 days before they get back to us. And in a process that's moving, that's a long time. Secondly, I would say most of these claims center happened 25, 35 years ago. So the idea that there's someone else readily available to talk to verify or not verify, it's almost impossible to find those people. So I've tended to stay away from it because the hearings are a very good substitute for that, and everyone sees them and hears them. The Attorney General may have more access to outside information than I do, but even the Attorney General's office would find it difficult to talk to somebody who knew that claimant, who was at that facility 25 years ago. It's very complex. It sounds alluring, but it's not going to turn up much information.
Thank you. Thank you,
Ms.
Mr. Chairman.
Rosenwald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for taking my question. As I look at slide 18, and I bring this up because there's been a lot of discussion about why are we paying the lawyers upfront instead of paying them out on the same schedule as claimants. And I kind of have two questions about that. One is, since we pay the claimants 5% interest every year, would we have to pay the lawyers an extra 5% a year? Could they come at us for that?
Currently, that's what's happening, but I would say this, Senator.
It is?
I'm sorry?
That's what's happening.
It is happening. But if I can just respond to that issue, because it is an important issue. All the money that's been spent to date on these claims, if the lawyers were volunteering their services, the amount of money you're spending would be the same. The lawyers' fees are part of the award, and the reason I haven't paid them out over time is the same reason the Attorney General didn't do that, and 95% of the cases settled directly with his office. Because the statute as written doesn't allow that. Or best case, it's ambiguous. And I had said to the Attorney General last fall, why don't we just amend the statute, General, to make that clear? I'll be happy to do it. Or why don't you, as the Attorney General of our state, instruct me to do that under the statute? I will comply with that. He wasn't in favor of amending. He never instructed me. But what I have done, because I'm sensitive to the balance in this fund, I've used whatever good offices I have to persuade the lawyers who represent about 94 or 5% of the claimants to take their fees over 3 years. I think, if I might, Senator, it would be really helpful, I think, for everyone, if you keep this fund alive, if the legislature said, we're going to take you out of the legal fee business, Administrator, you're not going to do that anymore. We're going to tell you what you can award for legal fees, percentage or whatever you decide. You can change the statute to take away virtually all of my discretion. I'm not complaining about that. It would make my job easier. If you say to me you can't pay any financial debt people have, I'm okay with that too. It's not my job. The only reason I do those things, you gave me discretion on legal fees. Specifically in the statute, I have to decide it. You gave me discretion in the statute to consider life circumstances or financial circumstances or health circumstances, not in the amount of the award, I can't change that, but how I pay it. Are they equal installments? How many years do I pay it? If the legislature said, we're going to tell you how many years you have to pay awards, how much you can award lawyers, you are not going to hurt my feelings. It would make my day job a lot easier. All I'd have to do then is decide what the claimant has established and what that amounts to under the worksheets that this legislature created. I'm not a free player here. I follow, as Attorney Foley said, I look at what the awards are, I look at the multipliers, I look at the aggravators and mitigators. I'm just following what I was told to follow, but I do have discretion, since I'm the only one sitting in the room, to say how much of that can I credit. Not an easy job, by the way, particularly when you're dealing with people sometimes crying, sometimes they need to take breaks, so that's why.
I think that some of this ground has been plowed already with both myself and Senator Rosenwald and LBA. You had a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, the House did add in HB2 that the attorney's payments will match from here, starting effective July 1, 2025, that the payments paid to the attorneys will match the same payment terms as what the settlement is paid out at.
And that's appropriately, you're right. I'm not here to contest that.
Additional questions from the senators?
Yes.
Follow up?
Thank you. So if I understand what you said, when you're paying the lawyers out not all at once, you're already paying them 5% interest. And the way the House wrote House Bill 2, we would be paying the lawyers more over time. So we might want to think about that. But my follow-up question was, it seems that the AG has settled a few more cases than you have at the higher amounts. Do you know if those cases settled by the Attorney General do include payouts for lawyers over time, or is he paying them off upfront?
My understanding, Senator, Attorney General would be the best source, but my understanding is unless they ask me, which they've recently done, but very recently, to opine on percentage of legal fees or whether they're paid out over time, which they usually agree with the lawyers, almost all the settlements the Attorney General has reached, he's paid 1/3 in legal fees in a lump sum. And I'm not being critical of him. That's how it's worked.
To your question, the justice didn't know, and we will ask the Attorney General. Okay, are there questions from the other senators? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for the opportunity.
PLC. I will probably be a little lenient today, but if there are seats available, I do like people in the seats. And whenever you're ready.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. Just for the record, my name is Deanna Juris, Executive Director at OPLC, and with me is Heather Kelly, Director of Operations. I will try to get some of your time back here, and we'll be brief in my presentation. Just up front, the House did not move a penny in HB1 and made some small adjustments to HB2, so what you are seeing is very, very close to the governor's original proposal, the agency proposal there.
And you're smiling.
Yes, yeah, I'm not upset about that. I think I will quote Chairman McGuire, who said, "You are not the problem," and I said, "Thank you very much, sir." So just a quick overview. For the record, we oversee the administration of over 50 occupational licensing boards, councils, and commissions. 7 of those are advisory as opposed to independent regulatory boards. We assist them with two major functions, which is licensing, individuals who wish to practice in New Hampshire, and ensuring compliance. So that's licensing and board administration, and then our enforcement division. We have over 200,000 occupational licenses that are active currently under OPLC or its boards. We average about 100 complaints a month, and we conduct about 2,000 inspections annually. So quite a bit of work happening in this small office. Just some numbers, which is much more meaningful to this committee. So in 2024, the actual expenditures you can see, it's just under $14.5 million. The actual revenue was 13.1. Adjusted authorized for this current fiscal year is 16 and change. And the revenue as of March 30th, so to date, those most accurate numbers for you is 11.5. We do anticipate, as the year ends, there are some large renewal cycles, students graduating, coming out of school, or getting licensed, so we'll see that number come up in the last months of the fiscal year. To the next slide. So OPLC has a dedicated fund that was established with the passage of HB 409. Many of the people at this table were involved in some way with that legislation. It allows us to operate more efficiently and effectively. So that dedicated fund is funded by licensing fees. So there are no general funds that come. We have proposed a 10% increase of all fees, and that we had a public hearing last week on that's the PLC 1001 and 1002s. In chapter that will be voted on JILCAR either in May or June. So we would anticipate that revenue, it would be a 10% increase. So accordingly, our proposal is to match, roughly to match the revenue estimate there that we have, which is 27.1 over the biennium. We do have some other funds that we are currently operating at a loss, hence the need for this increase. So it's being used to cover current expenses. And then we have a remaining balance, you'll see towards the bottom there, 3.3 or so. So we're at a net loss of just over $1 million for this year. So we're making some budget changes. You will see that after the HB2 section, what we've been doing presently to deal with that issue, and then moving forward as well. The two primary changes that were proposed in HB2 is the transfer of 9 positions, so 5 mechanical inspectors and 4 electrical inspectors, to the Department of Safety and the Fire Marshal's office. That results in a net reduction over the biennium of $2.2 million to the office. Obviously, it's not a reduction overall in the state because those positions will be at the Department of Safety. It is included in their budget, in their proposal as well, to align with the critical function of safety. So these are licensees that are doing important work. They sometimes they get called out in the middle of the night. We've had some some carbon monoxide things in headlines over the last 6 months or so, so they're providing a critical safety function there. My office is an 8 to 4 paper pushing office. The fire marshal's office is much more out in the public, moving things around, and so that was the governor's proposal, was to allocate those resources where they're needed there for that public safety. The other change is to cosmetology inspections. So this would represent an option to reduce cost to associated shops. So in addition to the personal credential that a practitioner would have, either a cosmetology, a barbering license, in order to operate a shop, they also have to have a license for that business and facility, and that requires an inspection. Currently, those inspections are required annually, in addition to at the renewal of a license, which would be every 2 years, or to open up. So they're having it every year. The proposal was to say that shop owners could get a certification. It uses OSHA or any other substantially similar course to say, hey, I'm certified in clean safety practices specific for this practice. And then they would be able to be exempt from those routine inspections, just to allow them to continue to operate. But then the office would inspect if there are complaints that come in, they would be able to go out unannounced and look if there's complaints or issues that come in from consumers. And so it's an either or option. Either you have the annual inspections, or you get this one-time safety certification. The House amended that to remove the annual and just have it upon initial and renewal. So now the proposal is certification for safety, or in every other year, so with the license renewal. So that is the proposal there. So the position changes on slide 6, you can say, in addition to defunding 6 full-time positions in the 26-7 proposed budget, we have frozen The positions listed there, I don't need to read those for you. But, there are a number of those pending adequate revenue. So we would hope to, I'm at about a 25% vacancy rate right now. I would not like to continue to operate there. We want to be able to make sure that we're meeting timelines and getting credentials out the door and a timely resolution of complaints as well. But that's where we are currently. In terms of budget challenges, I don't need to spend a lot of time on this. I've had this discussion in public in many other places, but happy to answer questions. We do have a backlog of about 2,000 complaints in our enforcement division. We're receiving about 100 new complaints a month, trying to work through that backlog. There is some pressure, there's been some other discussions about moving that more quickly. Our resources currently don't allow us to hire additional staff to do that more quickly, and so we are working with what we've got. We are using ARPA funding to build a new licensing platform. I think it's just important to highlight here, this licensing is basically all we do, right? So for other issuing of permits, there's some streamlining of these processes across state government. I'm sure you've heard about a lot of them. It's a small component of the work that they do. This is all we do, and so it also is our system of record for finances and for reporting and all of that other piece there. So we're basically we are in the middle of building a new infrastructure for the entire office. So there's some risk there, and the funds for the project, they knew at the outset were not going to be sufficient to complete it, so that's going to be coming back in-house when those funds run out. So there's another potential challenge there. And then the last one is I need to migrate my enforcement side of the house into that same system of record to make sure I have a cohesive way to be managing those who are licensed and then those who complaints come against. So in my ideal situation, we would have this rollover funds that's really left over from during the pandemic when lots of people from out of state were getting licensures. We have kind of this extra, the rollover funds. I'd like to use that as kind of a capital infusion for this one-time IT development, but currently that's funding my daily operations and my payroll. So that is not an option right now. Other than that, you have our contact information on the last page. I'm happy to take any questions now or offline.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Director. So let's back up to your backlog of complaints.
Mm-hmm.
And you inherited, as I recall, about 6,000 case backlog when you came into the job.
Yes, sir.
You got it down to 2. Fantastic job.
Thank you.
Do you anticipate that as you continue on over the next few months, we talked about other changes, and I've sort of been the genesis, a part of that, about pushing this process along, but do you feel like once you get through this backlog that the staff that you have, you'll be able to kind of continue on and keep up with the new timelines we're looking to meet, or do you feel you need additional staff to do that?
It's hard for me to answer definitively just because I want to assess what that workload looks like without this huge pile of cases. I think it could be sufficient. I think, we had also considered the use of some temporary positions just to clear the backlog, even temporary part-time. The funding is just not there to even just really grind through this piece of it. I do think it is workable with the current staffing level to deal with the volume of 100 complaints coming in. I think that's probably doable. As my licensing process gets more streamlined, we're saying we want to make it as easy as possible, again, protecting public health and safety, but we don't want to provide a lot of administrative burden for people to get a credential, to get over the hurdle to practice. And then as those resources, as that's more streamlined, I may even with just staffing levels be able to move positions around to say, we need to beef up the enforcement side for the challenges that come after somebody has a credential. So I'm not looking at a super long-term infusion or a growing of the office. So I will stop there. Thank you.
Follow up?
So the House Bill 2 moves those inspections, as you talked about in cosmetology, essentially to a biennial inspection.
Yep.
Do you feel that will free up any staff time to perhaps apply to some of these other areas where you've been, perhaps your backlog cases, or as you talked about shifting positions around? Do you think that will help you at all there?
The current proposal in HB1 eliminates 2 of the 3 cosmetology inspectors.
Oh, I see.
So we found efficiencies in that way to say for just initials, 1 person would be sufficient.
So you feel in the end you'll probably come out even?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Waters.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And finally, Senator Pearl, thank you for your great work, Director. It's really good to see. And my question is that if you get the license fee increases, the 10%, do you think that that will mean you'll, not run at a deficit, and will you have maybe enough to have some rollover for that capital expense? And so how does, if that's approved, what does that approval do for your budget?
I think it would allow, we're getting closer to the fiscal end, so I think the fee increase, I anticipate it's gonna be pretty close to fiscal end, so it'll line up almost with the start of fiscal year
Yeah.
26. So it would mean I would continue to be much closer, my revenue and my expenditures would be much closer together than they presently are. So that would be ideal. The 10% is not, that increase, if it were effective today, it would not make up the current deficit for this
Yeah,
fiscal year.
fair
Yeah.
enough. If I may follow up.
Follow up?
So on the management system, how much do you need, and is that something you put in a capital request, or is this, could you talk about that a little more?
Yes. No, I did not put it in a capital request. Again, my hope is to be able to use the rollover funds. By statute, we are obligated to use those funds to reduce license fees. Now, it's a little interesting to say that I'm trying to increase fees with the surplus here, but the numbers are such that within a fiscal year without a fee increase, that surplus would be gone. I'm about $4 million short. So, but it keeps that increase lower than it otherwise would be, if that makes sense, to be able to use that to reinvest within the agency. So it's not a capital request, because we don't get capital, it's just fees.
So, if I may
Follow up?
what's the dollar amount for that system?
I would need my IT folks to help me estimate what that cost would be. I think do we have about $7 million in for the licensing system, and I think we would need 2 to 3 more to finish it if we were going with the current contractor the way that it is. Obviously, in-house, the cost is a little bit different, and I'm probably looking at a couple million for the enforcement side. It's a little less complex, but would need to integrate within the system.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I'm trying to reconcile slides 3 and 4. And figuring out, well, my first question is, why are your expenses going up so much? But my broader question does the 27 million in revenue, is that 10% increase?
Yes, so just get to my slide.
Because
Yes,
it's 2
on-
years.
On slide 4, the $27 million there in the middle of the page is the 2-year with the 10% increase. Yes, so that is presuming that it would be voted favorably by JAILCAR.
Got it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Additional questions? Thank you very
Thank you.
much. And I think after this, it's the Health and Human Services show. You don't like our big book?
Right here. Good, sir. Control that.
Good afternoon. I apologize. Can I start?
Yeah, I just was waiting for the LBA to get here. And if there's not 2 of them here, then either there or there, I have an extra seat if I need a third person to come up and testify. Go ahead.
All right. Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senators, my name is Nathan White. I'm the Chief Financial Officer with the Department of Health and Human Services. We brought you a large binder that's in front of you. I'm just going to give you a quick overview of what's in there. To start, you have each of today's presentations by major division area. And then at the end of each, example, point made. And then at the end of each section, there's also a document that we call the budget briefing book. And that provides a lot of detail and specifics for any accounting units that are over $1 million. And then you'll see there's a larger divider that says house. It has house on there. We also provided you with all the house presentations. So during the house, we went into a lot more detail relative to the programmatic details of the department. For the purposes of the presentations for today and tomorrow afternoon, we're going to be a little bit more directed per the instructions that the department received, focusing on the changes from the current biennium and to the next biennium. And so to start, we're going to start with the Office of the Commissioner. And
So the individual handouts we were given are the same as the ones that are in the book?
correct, only the ones in the book are in color.
Okay.
And so we're going to be starting with the Office of the Commissioner, and there's that tab for Office of the Commissioner to turn to. I'm going to hand it over to Marissa Henn, our deputy, to kick it off.
Great. Good afternoon. Thanks so much for having us. Again, Marissa Henn, Deputy Commissioner, and Commissioner Weaver had a prior commitment that conflicted with the budget presentation schedule, so she sends her regards and has been deeply involved in the creation of these materials and is available throughout the week. I think what I just want to start off with, obviously, I think the symbolic weight of the binders in front of you speak for themselves in terms of the fact that DHHS does a lot of different work, and we have the statutory authority and responsibility to carry out many different functions to protect and promote the health and well-being of people in the state in support of our mission to help individuals in the state of New Hampshire achieve health and independence. I won't go through line by line, but what we wanted to just set up for a few seconds as a framework for you is a reminder that at DHHS, we try to be highly integrated in our work. We are often serving the same communities, families across many different parts of our 7 core divisions. And so to that end, on the next slide, we have included an illustration of one of the main ways we stay integrated and focused on what matters to the people of New Hampshire by being guided by a core roadmap, essentially a business plan, a strategic direction. We are in the first full year of a roadmap that has guided our work. We are about to release, informed by our work here with you and across the budget process, a second roadmap. But in essence, what this roadmap does is it reminds us that while your binders may be very thick, we are doing what we do for a reason, to invest in people and in cultures of caring and healing. We are working to promote thriving communities of independence and self-sufficiency. And we are working as an agency to improve customer service so that doing business with us, whether you're a provider, whether you are a family, or any other individual needing supports and services, is as smooth and seamless an experience as possible. And so you'll see illustrated, we have roughly 15 core initiatives, many more goals and deliverables, and we're very proud of the progress and the impact that we're measuring across that roadmap. So I say that in part to hopefully make that giant binder in front of you make it feel like it actually has a sense of purpose and direction, because we feel quite confident that it does, and we're proud of the work and eager to work with you as we tighten our belts and get down to doing this work as effectively and efficiently as possible. So that's all I'll say by way of introduction, and looking forward to the discussions over the next 2 days.
Thank you, Marissa. If you turn to page 4 of the Office of the Commissioner budget presentation, there's just a couple of things. I know many of the senators here have a lot of experience with the Department of Health and Human Services, but there's just a couple of complexities that I do just want to highlight here. HHS, we use something to cost allocate. It's called a Public Assistance Cost Allocation Plan. And what that does is it allows our department to maximize federal funds. And we fund contracts, we fund positions, we fund various needs using this federally approved model. and that's very important to us. We also have well over 100 different federal funding sources as well. And each of those federal funding sources come with certain requirements and complexities. One of those is a maintenance of effort requirement, where the state's required to spend a certain amount of general funds towards a specific purpose in order to receive the federal funds. So the maintenance of effort for TANF, for example, is one that we've talked about before, where the state has to spend $32 million in order to receive $38 million of federal funds. We also have more standard matching fund models. Medicaid is an excellent example of this, where standard Medicaid, we get 50% matching federal, often referred to as FMAP as the acronym. Or in some cases, we can get 90%, such as in the example of Granite Advantage. And then there's a little visual there on the right side. You'll see budget, cost allocation, and actual, the three big circles. So the budget, that's where we start. The actual is the actual experience of how the expenditures occur. And as the division directors present the various programs before you, you're going to see that we can't always predict what the specific needs are going to be. So our costs, our budget, components of it is driven by the needs of the communities. So whether those are the DD needs, or whether those are children in behavioral health, or whether they're within the DCYF, we project based on the best information we have available, but ultimately some of those expenditures are going to be determined by the actual experience. Turning to slide 5, this slide here, this provides you with a high-level overview of the entire department. The ring there, the color that is highlighted green, that represents the general fund portion. So if you scan over to the right to House 2627, you'll see about $1.7 million of federal funds is comprised of our budget, and that's about half of our budget is federal funds. We also have a significant amount of other funds. A lot of those come from revenue earned by New Hampshire Hospital or Glencliff. We do have some fees. There's also rebate revenue within the Medicaid program and public health as well. And then the remainder amount there is general funds. And if you look at the state fiscal year 25 adjusted authorized general fund line there, you'll see it's at approximately 1.2 billion versus the state fiscal year 26 and 27 House, which is a little over $1 billion. Now, that's what's going to show up in the actual budget when you look at the budget numbers. But I put together the following slide on page 6 to try to give you a little bit more insight. Because of the way the state budgets, what you see in the operating budget isn't actually always the case. So you'll start on the left there, and you'll see final operating budget, and you'll see House Bill 1. And then below that, you'll see House Bill 2 general fund appropriations. So if you look at state fiscal year 25, you'll see there's over $137 million of general fund appropriations that were made in state fiscal year 25 that are effectively operating costs. A significant portion of that is represented by the Medicaid rate increases that were provided in the prior biennium. And then there were also additional legislative appropriations that were derived from the 24 legislative session as well that are accounted for below that. And then you also have to think about the back of the budget reduction that the department's currently under in this biennium. And that nets out for 25 around, just shy of $1.2 billion. And if you scan over to the House current position, well, there is an increase from the general funds in state fiscal year 25 from the final operating budget. Once you look at the back of the budget reductions, you look at the 3% HB2 reduction for Medicaid rates, you look at the HB2 delayed capitation payment, it starts to paint a very different picture. And that's the purpose of this, is to try to sort of provide a much higher level, broader overview of how the various HB2 provisions, the back of the budget reductions, fit in the larger scheme of things. And what you're also seeing in the HB1 numbers, and again, I'm trying to sort of paint a broader picture so that when the division directors follow, it has a little bit more context. The department also saw about a little over $30 million of general fund reductions to our positions during the governor's phase. So it's about 394 unfunded positions, which equates to about a little over 12% of all of our staff. We also saw some single class line reductions within the Division for Behavioral Health of about $38 million from a single class line for behavioral health services. If you turn to page 7, you will see a high-level overview of the full-time authorized position staffing levels. Division for Children, Youth, and Families, this is where we have our child protective service workers, so there's a lot of personnel there because they're out in the field, they're at the district offices, they're doing the work. The Division of Economic Stability, these are our eligibility workers, they're taking the calls, they're making the determined as to whether folks are eligible or not. Division of Long-Term Supports and Services, our adult protective service workers, and then of course, 2 of our 24/7 facilities in Ellen LaPointe, the CEO of New Hampshire Hospital will be presenting later today. We obviously have, over 850 positions within those 2 24/7 facilities as well. The House did add a few new positions to our budget. They added 3 positions that I'm going to talk about in the OCOM presentation and in just a little bit, and then they also added 3 additional DCYF attorneys, but they did not add additional funding to them. We were required to fund those positions out of other positions that are currently funded. So we almost have 400 unfunded positions going into this next biennium. There was also a section of HB2 that created additional hiring freeze restrictions for the Office of Health Equity within the department. If you turn to page 8, I'm going to go over just some high-level HB2 significant changes, and Henry and Katya and the other division directors are going to be talking about these in a little bit more detail. I just kind of want to frame them up. The first one, the Medicaid rate reduction, there was a 3% across the board Medicaid rate reduction. This would be about 17.5 and $35 million of general funds and a higher amount of federal funds, because in those cases, we would not only be able to take advantage of the 50-50, but this would also impact where we have higher FMAPs, such as 65-35 federal or 90-10 federal to general. There were also a number of changes to expanded Medicaid, and Henry Littman, our Medicaid director, is going to be talking about those, where the general fund prohibition has been eliminated and the program's actually been funded with general funds, which creates certain complications. We would also expect that the Granted Advantage program, which historically has not been part of the budget, would need to be added to the next budget in the next biennium, which would be a little over $600 million each year. The Governor's Commission had some significant funding changes occur during the House phase. Historically, the governor, or at least for the current biennium, the Governor's Commission has been funded by 5% gross liquor profits. That was changed. That statute was stricken from law. And in place of that, money was appropriated from the Opioid Abatement Commission. And in order to do that, there was also a corresponding HB2 provision that requires the department to terminate all agreements that we entered into on behalf of the Opioid Commission after May 1st through the end of the year. So that frees up a little over $10 million of agreements. We've also had other directives from the commission directing us to enter into RFP up to $10 million as well. But that we would have to terminate those contracts and liquidate them in order to have sufficient funding for the Governor's Commission of about $10.7 million each year. There were also some changes added late in the process that would effectively remove the commissioner's ability relative to the vaccination schedule, and Ian Watt, our director from Public Health Services, will be talking about that later. There was an across-the-board 5%, you've probably already heard this from other agencies, 5% surcharge added to all dedicated account revenue. This wasn't discussed during Division 3, so we didn't have an opportunity to get into some of the details. We do have recommendations for a number of accounts that we would not want to be part of that, the disproportionate hospital share account being one of them. That's the account where after we make dish payments, we conduct an audit, and we recover certain revenue, and then we redistribute it. So it's net neutral to the state and that would only be taking money away that was intended to go to the hospitals. And we also have some additional accounts within public health that Ian's going to talk about as well that we would recommend exempting. On the next page.
Question about that, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
So on those, we've been informed by some other agencies that it may contravene statute or federal
Yes.
rules. So if in those ones that you're proposing for exemption, could you please just make a note if any of those fall in that kind of category?
Yes, absolutely. And in Ian's presentation, he's included state statute and federal statute in the column to get to your point.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Back to you.
All right, continuing on page 9, there was a prohibition added to HB2 to prevent the department from entering into new state loan repayment program agreements. We would recommend that be modified to allow us to take advantage of some other revenue that we have available to continue that program in some limited capacity in the next biennium. There was also a unique provision that established a dedicated fund for recreational services for DD. It established the department as a charitable organization. After looking into that further, we don't know how that would really work. The department functioning as a charitable organization is a little unheralded, and it's not something that we would recommend. And then finally, while this isn't an HB2 provision, I already touched on it earlier very quickly, there is also a $46 million general fund back of the budget cut. So for the current biennium, it's a little over $23 million. We've been able to achieve that with relatively little impact to any programs or services. Because we already have a $30 million reduction to our personnel, and we were looking at the other reductions, and this is about twice as much as any prior back of the budget reduction. We do know that there would be some negative impact to services. Ultimately, the commissioner would need to make that decision. It's been quite some time since we've seen a back of the budget cut of this significance. I believe the last may have been Commissioner Toumpas. But this would certainly put us in a difficult place beginning July 1. On page 10, just a few more HB2 provisions that we would recommend keeping. There's an extension of a DD pilot program that was approved in the current HB2. This would allow that program to end naturally. It would carry forward the money from the current biennium and allow the remaining 5 individuals to age out of that. We would also strongly recommend keeping the provision that allows DHHS to transfer money among personnel lines, particularly if we're going to be managing a very large back of the budget cut as well as a high level of unfunded positions. That will be critical. There were some technical changes that we worked with the Department of Administrative Services on that we would recommend keeping. There's no budgetary impact. And we'd also recommend the continued suspension from the HB 191 laws of 2011. Otherwise, we would see some increases, particularly at the community mental health center level, in uncompensated costs. And then finally, there's also a conversion. There was SB 417 from this past session that created 2 classified attorneys. They should have been unclassified in order to be consistent with the way that those positions are, the other positions are today. So that's a very quick overview of some of the key HB2 provisions. There are many other HB2 provisions that will be coming up in the presentations. On page 11, this is the Office of the Commissioner. This is the equivalent of a high-level division overview. Again, the green ring there, that represents the general funds. The Office of the Commissioner is a little less than 50% general funds. Most of the Office of the Commissioner is driven by personnel costs, and these personnel represent human resources, facilities, finance, program quality and integrity, Office of Legal and Regulatory Services, the Employee Assistance Program, Office of Health Equity, and Bureau of Facilities, Information Services. And basically, it's a lot of behind-the-scenes team that keep everything running. And we allocate those funds. Again, we have some positions that are funded with over 100 various federal funding sources to maximize that. And we did not see any significant changes from year over year. One of the larger being the the unfunded positions. There were a few positions added via SB 417, and we also moved a few unclassified positions from other areas of the department. If you turn to slide 12, this represents the activity level for the Office of the Commissioner, and this is on page 624 of the House budget. There was a unique HB2 provision that was added during the House phase. Originally, in the governor's HB2, the governor had included a provision that would allow the department to accept gifts up to $1,000 without going through GNC. The House increased that amount to $250,000. The original $1,000 that was marked and based off of the corrections level for accepting gifts, and $250,000 was added by the House. The Office of the Commissioner, it's composed of primarily the Commissioner's Office administrative team, the finance team, the Contracts Bureau, OHE, and the state's Employee Assistance Program. It also includes workers' comp and unemployment compensation as well. There are about 21 unfunded positions within that activity. On page 13, this is the Office of Improvement. This is actually part of the Division of Program Quality and Integrity. This is the team that does internal audit. It also does the Medicaid Program Integrity, which is essentially the Medicaid fraud unit. There's a Special Investigations unit. This is where we have our Financial Compliance unit that goes out and audits our providers and works with them on any issues. The House did add, at the request of the department, they did add 3 new positions, and 3 new positions were requested to be added to the Medicaid recoveries team. And the reason for doing that was there has been money that has been left on the table, but we have not had the capacity to capture that. So by adding that, they assumed an additional $350,000 in the first year of the biennium and $700,000 of additional revenue in the second year of the biennium. We do have a technical request just to move those positions at a later date to the Office of Legal and Regulatory Services, where the Medicaid team that works on recoveries does reside. On page 14, this is Legal and Regulatory Services. This is the location we recommend moving those 3 positions that were added. One major change that happened later in the process was the Prescription Drug Affordability Board was eliminated in its entirety. The budget was removed. However, there are HB2 provisions that are still in HB2 that had modified some of the provisions governing the board. It's about $256,000 and $265,000 of general funds each year that was eliminated late in the game. Those funds were taken and they were added to the Glencliff home to personnel lines there based on the other reductions that had occurred at the Glencliff home during the governor's phase to personnel. There's also a provision that I alluded to earlier. DCYF attorneys converted. This is one of the larger changes from the current biennium. So there were 32 DCYF attorneys that were converted from classified to unclassified, and that was in accordance with the current HB2 that directed the department to do that. But otherwise, from a budget perspective, this activity has remained the same. The Office of Administration, this represents the facilities team as well as the HR team that oversees over 3,000 full-time authorized positions. No significant changes here, about 9 unfunded positions. There were a couple of HB2 provisions for the sale of property. The first one is the Terrell House in Manchester. It's, I believe it's a little over 3,000 square foot home. It's currently leased at no cost to the city of Manchester for a women's homeless shelter. The House assumed $300,000 on the surplus statement for the sale of that. There's also the Anna Philbrick Center. This is located on the Governor Hugh Gallen State Campus. There's an assumption of $5 million on the surplus statement for the sale of that. And there was also a directive to sell portions of the Hampstead State property. There was no assumed value in the budget for that particular item as well. On the next page, yes.
Surprise, surprise. Thank you for taking my question. Is that something that was recommended by DHHS, the sale of the Hampstead State property?
No, it was not.
Follow up? Were you aware of this?
There were a number of ideas, Nathan's referenced some of them, that came up toward sort of at the 11th hour. This was one of them, and I've certainly heard from a number of Hampstead officials we both know who were concerned, and I directed them to Representative Pearson's comments. Obviously, we have a lot going on that campus right now, as we recently brought on Dartmouth Health to run the psychiatric hospital and residential treatment facility, which is expanding. We have YDC under construction, so we are as eager as anyone to learn about the concept.
Thank you.
Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. So you've had $30 million of position cuts and then a $46 million back of the budget cut. I'm sure you've had internal discussions about what that back of the budget cut would look like. Could you give us some examples of how programs or services would be affected?
So we've certainly been looking at many different options. I think at this point in time, it's too early to tell because we need to understand, based on any decisions by the Senate, what is added back and what is not added back. When we're talking about $23 million each year, I'm trying to think of a good. I don't know if it would be prudent of me to start putting examples of what could be cut out, because I think we would really need to do a hard look at where does the budget sit today and what would cause the least amount of harm, because that's sort of the question that we'll be asking. What will cause the least harm? And I don't think we're at the point yet where we can answer that until we have better finality relative to the other numbers.
Paula?
So on the Prescription Drug Affordability Board, I know it was unfunded from the governor's budget, but the House kept the $2.5 million savings that this board was going to generate through, I think, the biologics.
Yes, and I think that was related to the biologics provision that they did keep in House Bill 2. There was some discussion of this in the House Finance Committee, and a majority of the committee felt that they could continue to rely on those savings even without PDAB being operational.
Okay, and one more if I could.
Yes, ma'am.
The Philbrick Center has 16 beds of transitional mental health housing. And we know that there are, I think, dozens of people at New Hampshire Hospital who could be released if there was a safe place for them to go. Is there, does the department have a point of view on selling this transitional housing, given that the language doesn't say it has to be sold to a transitional housing vendor?
I think, once again, it's not a satisfying answer, but there was a lot that we were taking in and reacting to throughout the marathon of the House hearings. I know Director Katya Fox will be providing more detail and can likely speak to that. Certainly, I think you raise an important point around the importance of discharge and the ways in which that in turn influences our ability to serve people who need acute care as well as avoid emergency department boarding. So certainly the essence of your question is important, and once again, we need to analyze all the impacts, but that has been a very important program, and I'm sure that Director Fox will speak to that.
Thank you.
Senator Waters.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to go back for a minute, if I could, to the Governor's Commission on Alcohol and Other Drugs and the funding there. And I wondered if you'd go a little more detail about the plan and the feasibility of of doing what they did to the opioid fund with that. And then the kind of second part of my request is that if it turns out that it is not appropriate or legal or possible for us to fund the Governor's Commission with the opioid funds, then we would have to restore the liquor funding, because otherwise the impact would be to eliminate that funding entirely from the Governor's Commission. So if you could talk a little bit more about that.
Sure. The Division for Behavioral Health is presenting tomorrow at 1 p.m. Would it be okay to have that conversation with Katya up here just to give better insight?
Just wanted to get it out there.
Excellent. All right, we'll be prepared for that. Appreciate the question.
Any other questions at this time? Continue.
All right. So continuing on page 16, the Office of Information Services. So there were no significant changes during the governor or the House phase for this for this budget. However, there are currently needs for our maintenance costs that were included as prioritized needs. These are relative to New Heights and Salesforce. Ultimately, this will probably have some negative impact on clients relative to eligibility services if these are not funded. The House did add funding for DocuSign, which was another prioritized need. So I apologize I didn't include it here during the House phase. The next page, slide 17, this is the second activity area for the Division for Program Quality and Integrity. This is our data analytics team that supports the Medicaid program, as well as our evaluation of Medicaid demonstration waivers. There were only 3 unfunded positions in this area, so overall not a significant change biennium to biennium or governor to House. So that's the end of the very quick, very high-level overview of OCOM. There are House presentations available towards the end that go into detail for each one of the respective bureau areas, if you do have any follow-up questions.
Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you. So New Heights is in the office of the commissioner, but MMIS isn't?
Yes, so New Heights is budgeted out of the Bureau of Information Services, out of our Class 27, whereas MMIS is budgeted within the Medicaid program.
Uh-huh.
Yes, ma'am.
Why?
I would.
They're both about Medicaid, right?
Yeah, I would suspect some of that may be history. The MMIS maintenance is certainly one of the more expensive line items overall. However, when you're looking at the amount of dollars that's processed through it, it's a relatively small ratio. When you're processing billions of dollars and you're spending $12 million of general funds each year for the maintenance and operations of that system, I always like to think about the comparison there. Yep.
Additional questions from senators? All right, we're ready to go on to the next group, or you got more?
We're ready to move on to Medicaid.
Okay.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir. When you're ready.
For the record, Henry Lippman, State's Medicaid Director. You have the presentation. Just want to make sure you have that.
If it's in the book, we've got it.
Okay. Am I good to begin? Okay. So I think if looking at the little dashboard there, you can see that the Medicaid program has a small amount relative to some other budgets in terms of the amount that comes from general funds. Obviously, the Medicaid program allows us to tap into federal funds. And just the question that you asked previously, Senator, I think the the reason MMIS appears within the Medicaid budget, because that's entirely Medicaid, whereas the eligibility system handles all sorts of programs. And just at a high level, there's a lot that's moved in the budget since the agency prepared it. The first, I think, in terms of at a high level, and I'll get into some of the more detail as we go through it here, but just some starting points. The general funds compared to the agency phase are 77.8 million less. There was also increased revenue in the form of, fortunately, some higher performing Medicaid enhancement tax, rebate revenue, also some of the premiums, which we'll talk about later. Not reflected above is the HB2 changes, which Nathan spoke to earlier, the rate cuts which go across the department where Medicaid is offered. Also, the $25 million delay in the capitation payments not reflected in these charts above. Moving on to the next slide. On the far right is the authorized full-time positions. We have 30 positions total and 3 that are unfunded authorized positions. The table above, I think it's important to point out in terms of the potential change in liquor funds funding, not funding Granite Advantage is not reflected there yet, nor is premium revenue. You know, as Nathan lifted up earlier in his presentation, there's a number of concerns here. I think as a finance committee, obviously, by moving it into general funds, you're increasing the challenge of balancing the budget because the liquor money is not part, as Granite Advantage is no general funds. This is now introducing the fact that you have to show a higher level of general fund need. And then as Nathan lifted up earlier as well, that I think once you put the general funds on the budget, you're also eventually going to have to put the federal funds, which is going to lift the budget up by $600 million. And I think, if I'm having been around at the time when Senator Morse was here, that I think there was purpose in terms of how the Granite Advantage program was structured, and I think that defeats that purpose. Moving on to the slide 4. The first major change, which is the children's Medicaid premiums. This is, New Hampshire has one of the highest levels, meaning it's more people can qualify, more children can qualify, with the 5th highest eligibility level. The premiums start at 255%. We're anticipating that this would affect about 8,600 children out of the approximately 90,000 that we provide coverage for. It also assumes that it would take some time to roll that in. The first year savings is 3.3 million. Second year is 11 million. So in terms of that item, I think that sort of covers it, and I'm sure there may be some questions that come up as I go through. The next item is to tighten Medicaid eligibility requirements. Probably better said is returning to pre-public health emergency eligibility requirements in terms of when we look at compatibility of information that we, say, go out to a site, be the IRS or something. We've historically had 10% compatibility. Assume that's close enough. During the pandemic, it's been 20%, rolling that back. There are other what's called E14 authorities that CMS allowed states to have to help states get back to regular operations of eligibility. You know, we had 230,000 redeterminations to catch up with. We had done 30,000 during the public health emergency. So I think there were some flexibilities that allowed us to use information, for example, on assets that may have been or income that were a little older, and so now it's going back to sort of regularly checking that information. And we feel that that will lead to a higher level of individuals who will not be able to be ex parte renewed, meaning that we have all the information we need and don't have to ask them to provide anything. Individuals will have to provide information in certain instances. And what we've seen historically is that there's a good percentage of people, when required to provide something, may not provide it, and that there's some churn that happens. There'll also be some people that don't continue coverage. I will point out that we were actively, throughout the pandemic period, public health emergency, and through today, we have been established a campaign to reach out to people that have redeterminations coming forward and ask them, do you continue to need Medicaid? And, sometimes it's a death or they've moved out of state or what have you. Just in the last 16 months, it's almost 14,000 individuals let us know, working with both the department and the MCOs. We also work on those people that close, particularly children and infirm. We make outbound calls to make sure that the reason that they're not renewing isn't because they didn't get paperwork or something like that. Both the MCOs and the department are working on that. And when we see individuals that have high utilization, suggesting that there's a medical issue, we go an extra mile and then some to make sure that they're aware that they can get coverage. Medicaid is also always open, unlike regular health insurance where there's only a narrow open enrollment period. Medicaid always has an open enrollment period. The next one, Granted Advantage healthcare premiums. This would require us to obtain a waiver for the population between 100% and 138%, the maximum. We're contemplating here that the earliest that could potentially be implemented, assuming a successful waiver, would be in 2027 fiscal year. We anticipate here that of the today almost 60,000 individuals, that the premium would apply to about 10,600 as a point in time. Lowest net cost drugs. The chair is lead sponsor on this bill, and we appreciate this. This is basically saying, and I love the analogy that you use, if there's a coupon where the brand name can be purchased for less than the store brand, take advantage of the lower price. That's going to save us money. It's going to build. There's the numbers here, the 930 and the 2.9 million, and the 3.8 million are what we projected in general fund savings. There's also a component that's not reflected here, that's additional savings in the Granted Advantage program. This to me is a savings that is, doesn't hurt anybody. It's actually, you can get the name brand. Pharmacy cost sharing, we've not changed pharmacy cost sharing in probably a decade or more. There are certain individuals that are exempt, children, people who have schizophrenic medicines, and others that do not have to pay this copay. Also, to the extent that you're paying a premium, that we're not going to have a copay to avoid system costs in the MMIS area to implement this. Turning to the next slide, slide 6, the Medicaid enhancement tax. The Medicaid enhancement tax overperformed what we had budgeted. I think one major player, Dartmouth Hitchcock, changed where some of their operations were housed, and some of that was probably a good part of the additional increase I think that we saw was related to that. Also, just in terms of our forecasts going forward, I think we've consulted rating agencies, in the financial markets and looking at other sources to predict the increase there. But that increased in the House phase 12.2 million in state fiscal year 26 and 10.4 million in 2027. On contracts, we reduced our contract lines by 25%. In general funds, that was 1.9 million per year. Also, in the agency phase, we pulled out 9 million related to how Hampstead used to receive dish payments. In terms of another HB1 change that was added by the Division 3 was increasing the drug rebate revenue, 6 million and 6.6 million, state fiscal years 26 and 27. Project Walk, which was a prioritized need of the department, was removed in the last phases of HB 2. Moving on to slide 7, HB 2 was talked about earlier, is basically this is sort of mimicking the areas that of price changes, rate changes that we made with the HB 2 of 2023, which didn't cover every single area of the department. And that is for 6 months, 17.5 million, and to continue that for the full year is another 35 million. In terms of HB2 capitation payment, delaying it 1 month so that falls in the next fiscal year was added towards the end of the House Division 3 phase. HB2, the last two items, one is trying to promote a higher use of home dialysis. There's some new home dialysis opportunities available, and trying to see to what extent we may be able to take advantage of that if there are savings. And then also the circumcision provision, which I know the Senate voted down. Moving to the next slide, which page number there, but this titled HB2 Changes to Granted Advantage. You know, I have concerns about the move from an operational standpoint of the uncertainty about if we, in the unlikely event, but possibly can happen, as we saw for a couple of years during the pandemic, if we needed additional money, that the uncertainty about of going through fiscal and executive council causing the program to potentially terminate if we didn't get approval there. Moreover, I think in terms of, we're really running like an insurance company, and to not know that we have access to reserves, if you will, for the unexpected, I think creates uncertainty for both our business partners. They'll have to factor that into how they look at how they price the product to us and what they're willing to negotiate. If they don't know whether the next month or 2 months or 3 months out that their enrollment could go away. And then I think the issue in terms of the greater budget of having the 600 million or more come on to the budget later on. But probably the last item on this page is what I really want to get into, which is, are we really potentially putting ourselves in a position of actually increasing the general fund obligations of the state? There are two slides that follow that I'd like to speak to for a moment. The first one looks at adult, disabled, pregnant, and parenting eligibility categories trending from July of 2013 to this past January of 2025. What you'll see there is a downward trend in all these eligibility categories, minus the spike during the pandemic. What we see in the Granted Advantage program, and if you look at the second slide, that in terms of overall enrollment in the Medicaid program, that the standard program where we pay 50% generally, or 65% for kids, has been going down a bit, but Granted Advantage has gone up a bit. Why is that happening? Because a lot of people who have disabilities, it takes a while to qualify for, to get those disabilities approved. So they do have an option of going on Granite Advantage to get health care more immediately and wait while those other things play through. It's also true in the pregnant group and the parental group. We estimate that up to 6,000 individuals, if they don't have the opportunity to get on Granite Advantage, could end up on standard Medicaid, where the cost sharing for the state is 50% versus, the 90-10 in Granite Advantage. So I just think in terms of how we work through the change that was proposed in the House is really something to consider. I think that the structure that's in place under current law is an advantage to the state financially, to how we contract with our MCOs, and most importantly to the people we serve. Moving ahead to the 5% administrative charge, I think this would be a real compliance issue for us. We're required to redistribute the money as we paid it out, and this would be, and I think Nathan and Senator, you asked for the citations, and we'll have those for you. I think that was covered pretty well, so I won't spend more time on that. SB 134, I know that the Senate has passed this requirement, and that the House, it's in committee in the House. I did want to just reflect that in statute today, we have what was passed in 2018. There are, to re-stand up that particular version of the work requirement would require an appropriation to be able to stand it up. How we interpret the bill is that we're required to resubmit the waiver that we've done before, because that's in current statute. There could be other ways to do it than the way we submitted originally. When I look at Georgia, that's already doing this, and I looked at the waiver that Arkansas has submitted. They're doing it differently than they did it before. Georgia is looking at people's work status on application and at redetermination. There's a lot to the way we designed the original work requirement that carries a heavy IT and staffing burden to be able to implement it. From my perspective, the concept of lifting people up by being able to get work is not something that we object to in terms of doing. I think the concern I have is the labor and where we have a hiring freeze and the cost of reintegrating the system changes that we made, and then whether in fact if people let's say someone who's eligible who only loses their requirement and ends up on standard Medicaid as a cost to us. But I think, in terms of just the bill as it's written, I think that would make sense to see, since there are 3 bills in Congress, there may be a state plan option I know that we have till January 1st to implement it, but I would think that we'd want to take what's currently, more, I guess I would call a more practical approach than the way we have it, in terms of we require, for example, someone to get a disability qualification, they have to have a doctor's visit to get a doctor's note. They have to do that annually. They have to submit paperwork every month verifying their situation. I think these are things that cause potential compliance issues for people that might otherwise be eligible. So I guess I'd ask that if the bill comes back to the Senate, that we consider, not to object to submit the waiver, but to consider making some adjustments to make it realistic from a cost standpoint and to not have it unnecessarily drop people who otherwise could remain eligible.
Senator Pearl?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, Henry, thank you for bringing that up. I'm certainly open, you know that's my bill I sponsored. I'm
Right.
certainly open to listening to suggestions that of better, more prudent ways we could implement this. So I look forward to having a further conversation with you on that.
We'd like to do that and appreciate that opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then finally, the last page, 13, is potential federal changes. And what we've identified here, we think are the most probable potential changes as we understand the world today. There are other ones that could be introduced. We're in a 6-phase, and I'd be happy to share this with you, a little pictogram of the budget reconciliation process where we're just about to enter the 3rd phase of 6. We're just starting this month, I think starting this week. But as it stands now, one of the areas that there seems to be a broad consensus among the Republican leadership in the House and the Senate is that to potentially reduce the amount of that the provider taxes can be. So today we have 5.5% for the nursing home payment, the NFQA tax that funds the Medicaid quality incentive payment, and for the Met Dish program, we're at 5.4%. There are 38 states that have a tax level that's at 5.5 or above. The Congressional Budget Office has modeled the rate at 5% and at 2.5%, and taking it out altogether. I don't think realistically taking it all together would be survivable by states. I think some modest reduction is very likely, and maybe it will be phased in more over time. But this one seems to have a broad consensus. I think I saw an article again today, just as I was waiting for this chance to speak to you, where it's being lifted up as a concern. The second one is related to the federal match. Today the lowest match you can get is 50%. This reflects what the impact in the impact section, and red are the numbers. Going all the way down to 42% would require almost $300 million. There's actually a proposal out now going all the way down to 40% as the floor. Again, this one seems to have some traction. The next one down is that covers that. Excuse me. The other one is the sorry, I confused the numbers. The Medicaid expansion was the one that potentially would the impact of going to the various levels, but the reduction of going from 50 to 42% on the standard programs, 194 million. And then block grants. It seems that block grants for the entire Medicaid program seem to be off the table currently, but potentially within the expansion population, there could be a block grant, which would, I think, cause the 90% trigger in that particular situation if the effective rate of the grants reduced it down below. So I think in terms of the block grants, this one I think is a potential in the grant advantage space. I'd be happy to continue to update the committee about how these things move. I think they're really sitting down to do some work over the next week or so. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Senator Rosenwald.
I do have a few questions. First, the 3% rate decrease to provider payments is really at least 6%, isn't it? Because we pay the federal match. So my question is, what could be the effects on parts of our Medicaid programs, particularly substance use disorder treatment, long-term care, and mental health care.
I think as you've heard from the advocates in those areas that you mentioned, I think they're very concerned about their ability to continue to serve at the levels that they have. I think having the care at the right place and at the right time is in the long run more effective in terms of maintaining and managing costs. I think we've done a pretty good job in terms of managing the rate of growth in the program itself, and I'm concerned about that the savings now will show up as higher costs in the future. The 3%, I think, in terms of the rate cut would be in terms of a rate would go down 3%. We would lose both the state and the federal component.
Follow up?
Follow up?
Thank you. So if we implement these premiums, some people will be disenrolled, just as some people will disenroll from not being able to comply with the work requirement. Won't that drive up uncompensated care?
It could, and for those individuals, I think, again, just the percentages, at 255, we're talking about affecting less than 10% of the children, and in the Granted Advantage program, about 20%. I think, if in fact, the legislature and signed into law these things, we're going to look at, some ways that we can mitigate for families that have more than one child, and we'll also, the governor wants us to have provisions for, someone under treatment that, to have some protection and empathy built into those rules. We have not built all that out yet, and we need to consult with CMS. But there would be a potential increase in uncompensated care related to that.
Follow.
Oh,
I mean, I know we can't go into detail on this, but given that we did not see all of the Met taxes paid, how realistic are the House's 3% year-over-year projections of growth?
Well, I mean, I think that, and from my perspective, speaking for myself, I feel that we should be able to reach an agreement. If we're unable to reach an agreement and the tax litigation resulted in us no longer being able to have an arrangement, that certainly would affect that estimate.
One more, if I could.
one more.
Thank you. So, did the House take into account that there's probably going to be extra insurance premium tax paid by the use of brand name drugs, which helps fund Granted Advantage?
So I guess in terms of the way it would impact the state is we'd have a lower net cost to the program, which is why we want to do that. In terms of how you're correct in terms of how the capitation rates would be funded. The premium tax comes after. I mean, the rebate comes after the payment of the capitation rate. So there would be an effect on that. It will be a little bit no. So the answer, I guess, is no.
They didn't.
They did not.
But we could.
Yep.
Thank you.
Senator Waters.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So on the potential federal action on the Met tax, So it sounded to me from some of your comments that you thought the 5% is not unlikely.
If there's an agreement to reduce taxes, I think that's a likely spot because many states, most every state except for Alaska have a program, and the majority are at 5.5%. It'd be, I think, hard to absorb that kind of hit across the country.
So, I mean, I know there's a lot going on about this, but in that case then, what you're saying in your note here, I mean, you mentioned 5.5 for the nursing homes and then 5.4 for Met Dish. So that the 6.4 million decrease in each 0.1%, does that include both the nursing and the Met Dish?
It does not include the nursing. That's just the Medicaid enhancement tax. In terms of the program there, I think probably we're talking about a tenth of a point being worth about. Let me give you a calculation of that instead of just guessing off the top of my head. But I think we're due about the MQIP payments about 10 or 11 million a quarter. So we're talking about 40 million ish, and a tenth of a point there, 400,000 roughly, maybe.
Okay. So, if I may follow up, so, I mean, safe to say then that if you put those two together and we see an increase to 5, that we're looking at 35 million maybe?
In that neighborhood's possible.
If I may ask another, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
So I wanted to go back to the proposed premium on the children's Medicaid.
Yes.
And I heard you mention that this would about 8,600 out of the 90,000 covered.
Yes.
So, do you have some thoughts on what's the likelihood, or what of those 8,600? What do you think would happen in terms of the likelihood of our being able to collect that, or would people drop out of the program, or just how would that game out that you would be able to actually, if we passed it, you'd actually be able to achieve the results?
So from a historical standpoint, New Hampshire, when they had the New Hampshire Healthy Kids Corporation, did have premiums that started at 186%. They had both premiums and cost sharing. We're proposing here only premiums. I do think that we do need to take into account, like employers do, size of the family in terms of how much the premium is. I know the number 280 has been thrown out there in the press, and it doesn't have to be that. The fact that we'll have no co-payments, I think we're trying to simplify how we would do it. I mean, I think we haven't done it since 2000, for almost over a decade. So in terms of how it would happen, I think, compared to the ACA exchange coverage, that this coverage is, still miles better than that for a family. I think we tried to be conservative in terms of what our collection rate would be in developing this estimate. And in terms of, I don't want to put a number out there because I don't want to discourage someone from thinking they have to make the payment. But, I do think that we feel like we're going to have to take into account the fact that there's 12 months continuous coverage for children, as a federal requirement, and that we want to have a compassion policy for those situations where, someone's under active treatment.
If I may, just one more, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. So, on this and some other areas with these new changes, what do you anticipate about the cost to the department for administering this, and is that accounted for?
It's not directly accounted for here, but I think in terms of by just doing premiums, we are looking at ways that which we may be able to use existing technology within the state to take advantage of this. You know, people pay for certain things online using state systems. We're looking at that we would have some costs there. I think it's probably coverable within the net of collections that we're thinking about.
I'm sorry, if I may, I didn't quite understand that
So-
last comment.
so-
That with the yield, I mean, within the net of collections, but would that reduce the yield to the?
I think that it could reduce the yield. It depends, you know, if you look at what it costs to typically
Yeah.
collect something, you know, like 3%, 5%, 6%, there could be some impact on this number, but I think we have enough in terms of the conservativeness of our estimate to hopefully still yield this figure.
Additional
Thank you,
questions?
thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Pearl.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you again, Henry. Can you talk a bit about what the process is for, you know, we have Medicaid members that may be receiving benefits in more than one state. Can you talk about the process, a bit about how you monitor that and, you know, what happens when you find someone and do you go back and retroactively collect those funds?
A great question. There's a few different ways that comes about. I guess the first thing is there's a public reporting system of people who have coverage in states. There was a recent study that showed prior to the pandemic, you know, New Hampshire had only 77 instances of that in 2019. Then they looked at it again. They looked at August 19, then August of 2020, when we couldn't disenroll individuals. That number went up over 2,000. So we protect ourselves. So we get information out of that system, and I think that system is a little bit could use some improvement from the federal standpoint. When we see that, we would go in and make an adjustment. I think the way we protect ourselves additionally beyond that is that in setting, in setting capitation rates, when someone has no utilization, that gets built into the future rates. And so if someone we're paying a premium and then they're actually getting healthcare somewhere else, we're going to recapture that savings. Secondly, we also have a risk corridor which limits the amount of profit that an MCO can make. And then we have a minimum medical loss ratio, which if they were saving a lot of money on that they're required to refund the state that money. All that being said, on top of that, we do, as I described earlier, that outreach to see if people still need their coverage or not, you know, checking address, looking for deaths and things like that. And as I said, in the last 16 months, it's a little under 14,000 individuals that we were able to remove from the rolls because either they expressed it, they passed away, or they moved out of state. So I think probably that effort is probably more effective than the federal effort. I do think that there's room to work better with the feds on that. I don't have a number today other than that study to share with you, but I think, you know, previously it was a pretty small issue if you consider, you know, we have over 1 million member months, and to have 77 out of that is pretty small.
Thank you.
Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you. Just to go back to the rate decreases for a moment. When we increased the rates last year, we didn't include any rate increases for hospitals. But the House version of House Bill 2 decreases rates across all providers. Since hospitals make up so much of the care delivery for Medicaid, won't that have an increase just by itself on revenues?
So with the hospitals, it's a little bit some nuances here in terms of there's the regular rates that we pay. As there are payments that would not be subject to that 3% reduction that we also pay currently. There's DISH, that would not be included in the rate reduction. There's also our ability to pay what we call directed payments. And, in terms of the room that we have to set those payments, that they may not see as much of the decreases. It's not a one-for-one, I guess is what I'm saying, that there are some nuances how that would actually play out.
All set? Anything else?
Yes, one last thing. One of the savings, and Karen Hebert, who's oversees the eligibility area, we were unable to fund the call center. And one of the concerns that I have is our ability to get back to pre-pandemic processing of eligibility. And that if we can't complete a redetermination timely, the person remains until we do complete it. So I think Karen will tell you about, it'll take about 7% of her staff to compensate for no call center, which it's not good that we will not also receive, be harder to achieve those savings or not at all. And then the other part, which I think.
She wants to come up to the other mic.
Oh, great. Is Karen here?
Oh, I guess not.
The other piece to it is that it also will slow down eligibility for everybody else. What they saw in Georgia when they added their work requirement, along with that, when they had to redirect people to processing, not how they're doing it today, but previously, that it slowed down eligibility determinations for people trying to get coverage. And so I know one of the things that I regularly take some calls from various legislators about, the time frame sometimes it takes to get eligibility. And I think that's, from a customer service standpoint, not having any call center would be impossible to stay as timely as we're staying, would have an effect on realizing the savings. And if you add a work requirement on top of that, it would be, I think, not a good situation for us. So I encourage you under her budget to reconsider that point for us as a department. And I appreciate your time and attention.
Okay, thank you very much. Glencliff is next. And I'm assuming that the senators are taking their break as they need one.
Oh, we're not gonna take a little,
Not unless you want one. Okay. Whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Senators, thank you for having us this afternoon. I'm Ellen LaPointe. I'm the CEO at New Hampshire Hospital, and I also support Glencliff Home. So I will kick us right off. You'll see in your book the presentation for Glencliff Home, and actually I'll pause a moment and allow the Chief Financial Officer to introduce himself.
Thank you. Brett Mason, Chief Financial Officer at Glencliff Home and New Hampshire Hospital.
So I won't spend too much time on the introductory slides with the mission of Glencliff Home, but I did want to spend a couple of moments on slide 3 for the key components of Glencliff operations. So as you may know, there are RSAs and HEMs that are the requirements of, and the administrative rules that Glencliff operates under. They have several services that they provide, including things, of course, like nursing care, recreational services, etc. There are also several other services provided, but not limited to primary care physicians, psychiatric support, occupational therapy, etc. Glencliff does strive to use non-medication modalities and alternative approaches, as well as training staff in behavioral interventions, such as sensitivity training, so that they can support the residents that reside there to the best of their ability. On slide 4, you'll see the budget overview. It's probably in a familiar format that you've seen so far with the other DHHS presentations. I will point out a couple of key points that, of course, personnel are critical to the mission at Glencliff Home, and they equate to approximately 84% of Glencliff's budget. I'll also point out that Glencliff does collect Medicaid payments to offset general fund expenditures, of course, via patient revenue. On the next slide, slide 5, you'll see the accounting unit for professional care. Again, in similar format to prior presentations, you'll see funded and unfunded positions. There are 65 classified funded positions and 0 unclassified, and then we have 51 classified unfunded positions and 0 unclassified. A couple of significant changes that I wanted to bring to your attention are the 51 positions that were unfunded at the governor's phase of the budget. The House did add some additional funding and recognized that the personnel vacancy drag has been useful to fund the agency contract support that Glencliff requires, and added $486,000 in general funds to partially address that shortfall. On slide 6, you'll see the accounting unit for custodial care. And again, classified positions in that category is 24 with funded classified positions is 24 with 7 classified positions being unfunded. 2 significant changes to bring to your attention. Again, those 7 positions that were unfunded, and no significant changes at the House phase. The next accounting unit is administration, where there are 8 classified positions and 1 unclassified position that are funded, and none of which were unfunded. And there were no significant changes to address. Lastly, I have the maintenance accounting unit. And again, 14 positions that are funded, classified positions, 0 unfunded positions, either classified or unclassified, and no significant changes to bring to your attention.
Questions from the senators? Senator Rosenwald.
What is the census right now at Glencliff, and how has that changed over the past few years?
Thank you for the question. So the census at Glencliff Home is approximately 65 individuals. They have in prior years been upwards of around 120 individuals. In the most recent year plus, they've been closer to a maximum of around 70.
Ma'am?
What is the reason for the decrease in census?
There is a couple of reasons. There is a lot of work that goes into ensuring that Glencliff Home is utilized for individuals that really need that level of care. It often is for individuals who don't meet criteria at other nursing facilities. There's also been a significant focus with the Community Mental Health Agreement to have individuals be able to be in their communities of choice. Glencliff Home is rather remote, so they work very hard at ensuring that individuals who are going there really require that level of care and location.
Could I ask a question of Mr. Ripple?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. So I see that $486,000 a year was added during the House phase. 250,000 of that came from the Prescription Drug Affordability Board.
236,000 did. The Division Three's original proposal was to put in $250,000 per year for positions at Glencliff and leave separately 236,000 in for PDAB, and then when they unfunded PDAB, they just added that to the $250,000.
Thank you.
Additional questions? Seeing none? I think we're ready to go on to the state hospital.
Great, thank you. So again, I'll jump right in. Slide 2, it provides an overview of New Hampshire Hospital services. I won't spend too much time here, but I did want to highlight the second bullet that coordinates the placement of patients experiencing acute mental illness across the state's designated receiving facilities, or DRFs. You'll hear me refer to DRFs a couple of times in this presentation. I did want to just have the committee know that the New Hampshire Hospital's coordination of those patients from a statewide perspective is somewhat of a newer venture for us. We did, obviously, given our size and our mission at New Hampshire Hospital, receive the majority of that work. But through the efforts of Mission Zero and the Care Traffic Control Department at New Hampshire Hospital, we now receive all of the state's IEAs and support the other DRFs in trying to identify the best location for any patient to meet their needs. On slide 3, I'll spend just a little bit of time on this one. It's one that myself, as well as many others, are particularly proud of. This is a visualization of the reduction in the emergency department queue. So again, you heard me mention Mission Zero. I know this committee is very aware of that collective work. It has been a vast effort through many different individuals, both in the department as well as community-based stakeholders. We have some participants in the audience here from NAMI New Hampshire, and there's been a great deal of involvement and collaboration and teamwork to be able to accomplish these initiatives. We have also had the opportunity on more than a handful now, I would say we're getting close to 2 handfuls, have reached zero on a number of days with adults boarding in emergency departments statewide. I believe as of today, although it does fluctuate rather quickly, that we have 4 adults who are waiting, and hope that we would be able to provide them beds either at New Hampshire Hospital or another DRF very quickly. I want to highlight this just a bit more with what we refer to as the queue, which is the adults who are waiting, being down. It has really allowed the entire system of care, both from a New Hampshire Hospital perspective, community-based DRFs, and I would venture to speak on behalf of the hospitals to be able to really take a bit of a breath and focus on the actual delivery of care to meet these individuals' needs, as opposed to the stress and the strain that impacts the entire system when there are very high numbers of adults who are waiting in emergency departments statewide. I want to reiterate this, especially as it relates to some of the proposals with regard to mental health funding. And I know Director Fox will be presenting to you tomorrow, but of course, her Bureau, as well as New Hampshire Hospital, are very closely aligned in meeting the needs of this population, and it does have a major impact on the queue, as well as New Hampshire Hospital's operation to consider those proposed funding changes.
One of the statistics that isn't on your chart is the number of days that those people have been waiting. That might be an interesting addition to this graph. Because it used to be weeks, and now it's days or hours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for pointing that out. You're exactly right. We've also been able to reduce the amount of time that these individuals are waiting by approximately 42%. So I appreciate you bringing that up, because that's also a very positive metric that goes a long way. So moving to slide 4, again, you can see New Hampshire Hospital's budget overview. 2 key points that I'd like to bring to your attention, of course, similar to Glencliff, that our budget is also supported by patient revenue. New Hampshire Hospital collects, of course, Medicaid, Medicare, as well as commercial insurance to support our operations. A significant thing that I also wanted to bring to your attention is that we do struggle with discharge barriers to be able to have our population at New Hampshire Hospital move out of that acute level of care back into a community-based resource or the living circumstance of their choice. When a patient is ready to be discharged from New Hampshire Hospital, there's not always a suitable option available to them. Insurance does have limitations on what can be covered, which does result in New Hampshire Hospital incurring uncompensated care costs. Generally, the number of patients at New Hampshire Hospital who are facing this challenge is anywhere between 70 to 100 individuals, which is rather significant given that our population, our census capacity is 185 beds. If we could move to slide 5. That accounting unit, of course, for New Hampshire Hospital, with the funded positions, classified funded positions being at 578, unclassified at 12. We currently have unfunded classified positions of 108 and 1 unclassified unfunded position. I will note that for some significant changes that have taken place, the House did add $5,000 to personnel expenses to indicate a preference for additional funding in that class line. You mentioned, Senator, the Philbrook building. I am able, hopefully, to address your question in that the House did add the HB2 provision requiring the sale of the Anna Philbrook building, and it does currently house 16 transitional housing beds as well as approximately 50 staff members from New Hampshire Hospital on the other side of the building. I will note that it was never the long-term intention for NFI to remain as residents in that Philbrook building. It's not especially conducive to being a residential environment for providing that level of care to individuals. I know that NFI has been actively seeking alternative locations to provide that level of care for those 16 individuals. That has posed challenges for them to be able to procure that location, but it is something that they are working on with the ultimate goal of no longer needing to reside in that facility. And I know it is not the department's intent to not be able to have those beds continue to be in existence in another appropriate location, given that we do depend on them from a New Hampshire Hospital perspective.
Yes, ma'am.
So a couple of budgets ago, we appropriated a significant amount of money for transitional housing. And we got like no bids at all. Since then, the cost of housing has gone up so much that I wonder how realistic is it to think that NFI could buy a house in Concord or somewhere and afford to do the transitional housing at a rate the state could afford to pay.
Thank you, Senator. I think it's a very valid point. I do know that they have been able to procure a property approximately a year or so ago. And forgive me because I'm not remembering the name of the town that it's in, but they did a phenomenal job with that property. I know that since then they have tried to secure additional properties and we're very close, at least with one, but that sale ultimately didn't work out. I think it's a difficult question for me to be able to answer other than to know that we're in close communication with NFI. We don't intend to not have those 16 beds in operation. And if the sale of the facility does need to be pursued, then we would want to work with NFI in terms of the timeline.
Yes, ma'am.
So, thank you. If we're going to keep that provision, should we put a contingency in there that the sale cannot be completed until there is another option for these 16 beds?
I think that that might be a helpful contingency just to create that reassurance that the system wouldn't face any further constriction as it relates to bed availability.
Thank you.
Senator Waters.
If I may, since we're on that, could you have some more conversation as well about the staff that has offices there? What provisions would that require?
Sure, thank you for the question. So, New Hampshire Hospital has capacity issues as it relates to staffing, and the departments that currently reside at the Philbrook building are such that we need them to be in close proximity to the hospital to be able to do their work, but not necessarily under the same roof as the remainder of the staff. And that is primarily our finance department, who CFO Brett oversees. We also have a handful of IT support staff, and we have some health information staff who reside there as well. I do know that, again, if it becomes the priority to have the sale of the facility, that the department is committed to being able to find alternative locations for these individuals. It might be such that they're spread out a little bit more throughout the campus, which, could pose its challenges, but certainly it's better than any alternatives.
Thank you. Thanks, Chairman.
Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you. Question for Mr. Whipple. House put $5 million for this sale on the surplus statement in 27.
I believe so. Let me just take a quick look here. Oh, sorry, looking in the wrong place. Yes, 5,027,000.
Okay, so the number of people that you have in the hospital that would be eligible to move to transitional housing right now is?
Bit of a difficult question to answer,
I
given
understand.
given that not all of those individuals require the same level of care or community-based resources. So some of them could be waiting for independent apartments. Some of them could be waiting for a bed in a transitional housing setting. Some of them would do best in a group home. So it's a wide variety of need in terms of their safe transition into an alternative location. However, right now, I believe that the number of patients is approximately 110 individuals.
All right, additional questions? Thank you very much.
Did you want me to continue forward?
Oh,
Just a bit
I-
more. If you feel like you have enough information, that's fine too.
I thought you had completed.
Sorry,
I
thank you.
apologize.
I did just want to point out on this same slide 5 that the point number 3 in regards to summary of significant changes is that in anticipation of the future high security or maximum security addition being added to New Hampshire Hospital to be able to support the civilly committed patients who currently reside at the secure psychiatric unit. The House did add $5,000, and you'll see on that slide where you can find that in the briefing. The next couple of slides are very quick, given that there was really no significant changes to bring to your attention. In the accounting unit for administration, there are funded 13 classified and 5 unclassified. Unfunded were 2 classified and 1 unclassified. On slide 7, you'll see that that is our facility and patient support accounting unit. The funded positions classified are 166, unclassified 0. Unfunded classified of 21 and 0 unclassified. Not necessarily a significant change, but something that I just wanted to make sure that you were aware of. That funding was added to the 26-27 biennium to class 49 to enhance the hospital and campus security. Department of Safety has partnered with us on that and contracted with a security firm at New Hampshire Hospital, and New Hampshire Hospital pays Department of Safety via an MOU. Last slide is our accounting unit for, again, for facility and patient support, and really no significant changes to note there. Classified funded positions are 399, 7 unclassified, and then unfunded are 85 classified, 0 unclassified.
Additional questions from the senators? I think we're good.
Thank you.
Oh, I do have one question that's not really this, if you sit down for just a second. The state prison said that they have a pharmacist pretty much on duty 24 hours a day. I believe that you have pharmacists in the state hospital 24 hours a day. If they contact you about some kind of way to share the pharmacist, and even if I have to have a state policeman run prescriptions from one place to another or from a hospital, I certainly hope that you would enter, talks with them and find out if we could, cut down some of those positions.
Sure, we would be happy to try to be supportive to them and work through that. Thank you.
Thank you. It's all you this time?
I'll me this time. This one hopefully should be fairly easy. So next up is Hampstead Hospital and Residential Treatment Facility.
If it's just you, I wouldn't mind going to the next one and then coming back to you, because you're going to be here anyway. And Senator Birdsell is up with a meeting with the governor, and I know she does want to be here for this one. So would that cause any problems with you?
I'm going to be here one way or another, so I can bring Ian up.
I thought so.
Oh. Trisha's just going
Yeah.
to find our division director. So in lieu of that, we're going to be moving to the Division of Public Health Services, and Ian Watt will be joining us here.
With the number of papers we have stacked in front of us, it kind of looks like the governor and council, with sometimes when they have these big contracts with the stacks of paper that are a foot or more high. So I apologize. I changed the agenda, moved you around.
I apologize. You've been here much longer than I am. I apologize for keeping you waiting. How are you? My name is Ian Watt. I'm the director for the Division of Public Health Services. So I want to just start by thanking everyone for their time, the chance to share some information about our division. I believe the presentation's been passed out. So the Division of Public Health Services has a core function to protect the health of all people in communities in New Hampshire. Our best work is done really in the absence of you seeing and hearing our work. It's in providing clean air, clean water, clean food, and ensuring the supplies of these things are free from contaminants and otherwise, whether it be through lab testing, inspection of food establishments, or otherwise. We provide information to the people of New Hampshire on services available to them, on data available to them to analyze how we're doing, how the department is doing, and what things can be done to improve their own health. To ensure their access to care regardless of barriers, whether they be geography, income, or others, we aim to limit and diminish the spread of infectious and chronic disease by making resources available, investigating disease outbreaks, and making sure that people have what they need in the instance of disease. And then finally, responding swiftly during an emergency event and making sure that we have medical and home care to ensure that people are protected and cared for. If you move on to slide 3, you can see just a sampling of activities that we performed during the calendar year in 2024. This really covers the breadth of what we do across our 7 bureaus, whether it be testing for lead to ensure that children have access to lead tests and make sure that they don't have blood lead poisoning, radon tests to test our homes, a real concern here in the Granite State, chronic disease programs, arthritis, breast and cervical cancer, diabetes, and otherwise, as well as some of our disease investigation on the infectious disease side. We also run the Public Health Lab, as you all are aware. The Public Health Lab includes 4 focus areas: microbiology, our water lab, virology, and chemistry. And that works to ensure that people have access directly to water tests, whether it be a private well or public water sources, as well as other sources that may serve their needs. So I'm going to move quickly so we spend more time on some of the meat of our budget needs and otherwise, because I know you all have had a long day. On slide 4, you can see the headline of our budget. The real headline for you all to know here is that we are incredibly reliant on federal and other funds in the Division of Public Health Services. More than 80% of our budget comes from federal and other funds. A large proportion of that, 80%, is also federal funds. So we're extremely sensitive in the current environment. We have over 50 grants and more than 70 accounting units. So as the federal funding situation has changed, so too has our change. Our goal is to be as nimble as possible to provide the services that we provide with the funding available to us. We've already seen some diminishing in those funds, as you all are aware, related to recent COVID-related funding rescission, but our goal going forward will be to maximize everything we have state and locally to meet our core needs. I'll pause for a second because I think I'm speaking quickly, having arrived a minute late. Are there any questions so far?
Senator Rosenwald.
What is the status of that $80 million cut in federal funds? I've gotten varying interpretations from the Department of Justice and Health and Human Services.
So all grants, thank you for the question. So all grants give the right to an administrative appeal. And so the state has exercised our administrative appeal relative to both SAMHSA and the CDC for the grants that were removed. We filed that paperwork through the Department of Justice, I believe, last week. And now it's in the hands of the federal government to receive that appeal and adjudicate it however they do. So everything to date that we can do at a state level has been done, and now we're just waiting for any next steps.
Follow up?
Thank you. Do you know what the timing is?
I can't speak to that today, unfortunately, no.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. So I'll move on to slide 5, and I know this is something that's gotten some attention already today, which is the proposed 5% surcharge on dedicated funds across the state budget. We have a variety of dedicated funds here in the Division of Public Health Services. I've listed 8 specifically that we would consider really strong candidates for exemption due to both need, but also functionally appearance in either federal or state statute. Noting that these funds are directed to dedicated services and the programs that they serve. I'll go through a couple really quickly. The first line, the WIC food rebates, is actually a federal statute that would oversee or serve that program. Functionally, we are WIC beneficiaries by infant formula through their WIC benefit. We then get a rebate back through Abbott Laboratories, who are our contracted vendor. They give us the balance between the contracted retail price and the wholesale price, and then that money gets put back into benefits. So if we were to receive a surcharge, besides the fact that it would violate the federal statute, it would also diminish the amount of benefits available to women and children enrolled in the program. I note a couple, the newborn screening funding, RSA 132.10a, specifically notes that newborn screening funds received through the purchase of filter papers. That's how each hospital that participates in the program receive the filter papers from us. That RSA specifically notes that all of those funds must come back and pay for program services. So again, it would require a change in statute for that money to be charged otherwise. The radiological health assessment, just skipping down a little bit, similarly noted in RSA 125.f8, notes that those are also fees that need to go directly back into services. The radiological health program specifically oversees our testing of radiation emitting machines. So we go out and make sure that MRI machines, X-ray machines, and other radiation emitting machines, in whether they be medical offices or elsewhere, are in compliance and safely operating. So if we had a change or a surcharge in that program, it may diminish access to funds to serve those needs. And then finally, I'll just note the lab equipment replacement fund. That's noted in RSA 130A15. We actually already have a 50-50 revenue split between the program fees and the state treasury. So again, diminishing it 5% further would effectively be a larger tax on the program over that existing cap. I'll pause there if there are any questions.
Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you. We heard earlier that there might be a different funding source for the state loan repayment program. Is that the JUA?
The JUA funds, the last line of that chart, yes. Are the other funds available? We have just under $3 million in available funds from JUA. I'll jump ahead a little bit. One of our concerns about the budget as written is not just the fact that the general funds are not available, which is obviously its own concern. However, there's also a provision in the House budget that we cannot initiate any new contracts regardless of funding source. So one of the really critical takeaways I hope you have with you today is that we would like to be able to access and use those JUA funds for new agreements, whether or not we have general funds available to us.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I'll move on, and I'll go somewhat quickly through some of our bureaus. I don't want to give short shrift to anyone, but want to make sure we focus on the things probably most critical to you in shaping our budget going forward. Activity 9000, our Bureau of Administration, is our director's office. We're responsible for overseeing and implementing all programs and activities across the division. That also includes our rent and indirect costs for the entire division in that AU. There are no significant changes to that AU in this budget, and we'll plan to proceed as budgeted there. I'll move on to what we call BIPSI, our Bureau of Public Health Statistics and Informatics. That's slide 7. This is our team responsible for data management and analysis across the division. They specifically oversee and implement our DHHS data portal. The data portal, which is a publicly available dashboard, includes more than 587 dashboards across 41 health-related topics that allow the public to access and utilize health data for their own purposes. They also coordinate on electronic data reporting, whether it be with hospitals, labs, and others, to ensure safe and secure transfer of data where legally required to the department and externally. And then we also work with programs to analyze our data and make sure that our programs are maximizing the data generated by their programs for program outcome. Moving on, I'll move to our Bureau of Public Health Protection. Our Bureau of Public Health Protection focuses largely on our environmental programs. Specifically, they oversee our food protection section. The food protection section is responsible for licensing of over 5,000 food establishments in the state. That includes retail facilities like groceries and restaurants, but also our dairies, schools, and bottle and beverage manufacturers. So a really large footprint. Mentioned them above. I didn't call them out specifically in the surcharge slide. There is a fund which is capped at $300,000 specifically from bottle and beverage manufacturers and others, and that would be another place that we would be looking for an exemption from that surcharge to ensure that program expenses are available for our inspectors. This bureau also includes our lead program, Healthy Homes and Lead Poisoning Prevention Program, that works to implement RSA 130A, specifically to make sure that any children who have an elevated blood lead level get the services and treatment that they need to ensure their safe development and their family's access to care. The Radiological Health Program, which we talked about briefly, is included in this area, again, inspecting over 4,000 radiation emitting machines and making sure that those machines are safely operated. And then finally, our Environmental Health Program is also included here. That includes our radon program and other data related to community health. We do have 9 classified positions that were 10 positions overall that were unfunded in the House budget. And we'd be looking, obviously, to work within the packet of positions available, but could potentially be impacts, specifically in food protection would be the one area of concern. But otherwise, the diminished capacity would lead potentially to slower services or slower turnaround for some of our fees or our licensing processes. I'll pause. Any questions?
Questions?
All right. I will move on to our Family Health and Nutrition Bureau. Family Health and Nutrition includes three areas. One is nutrition services. Nutrition services is largely known for its execution of the WIC program. We spoke briefly about the Women and Infant Children nutrition program, specifically providing benefits to families with children under 5 who qualify for eligibility with nutritious foods available to them at retail outlets across the state. This also includes our maternal and child health program, where data analysis is done. We also operate our integrated primary care program to ensure that primary care services are available to women and infants at our federally qualified health centers and 11 facilities across the state. And finally, our newborn screening program, which enables some of the services we already detailed. Most importantly, out of this bureau, I want to speak to the elimination of the family planning program from the budget. The House budget included the elimination not just of the state general funds, but also the federal funds from the Title X program. The family planning program, which is part of the federal Title X program, which is only over 50 years old, has operated for 50 years to provide low-income clients with basic reproductive, infertility, and sexual health and sexual and reproductive health services. It's really critical that these services do get a second look from the Senate. The diminishment or reduction or elimination of these would absolutely have a major impact on a number of areas. Before we met today, I looked into some of our rankings in various measures of maternal and child health. We rank in the top 5 or 10 nationally in a number of things, and I'm gonna list them off because I think they're both a testament to the work done by our team, but really to the entire state and the legislature and the support given to these programs. Those ratings include teen pregnancy rate, our rates of various sexually transmitted infections, including chlamydia and syphilis among women of reproductive age, breast and cervical cancer deaths, health and reproductive care outcomes, preterm birth rate, and overall coverage, access, and affordability for maternal health care. And I think what we're seeing here is a real risk. Right now, we have 4 organizations contracted at 7 sites across the state. This is part of a system of care in maternal health. Most importantly are the sites that we have in the northern part of the state, both Coos County and Laconia. We have sites in both of those areas. Those are really the only access to care. As we've seen limitations or closing of our birthing centers, people who are getting pregnant, women and families who are planning families, have such long drives and such distance to care that absent these services, we really would see kind of massive gaps in our service and coverage areas in the state. We work right now with 4 organizations: Amoskeag Health, Lamprey Healthcare, the Community Action Program of Belknap Merrimack County, and the Coos County Family Health. We do not currently work with Planned Parenthood of Northern New England. They're also historically a Title X beneficiary. As of a recent federal move, they no longer are, or currently are not, a federal Title X beneficiary, but we do not have a contract with them right now.
Senator Birdsong.
I'm sorry, could you name those contracts again?
Sure. It's Amoskeag Health, Lamprey Healthcare, the Community Action Program of Belknap and Merrimack County, and Coos County Family Health. And again, the 4 contractors operate 7 sites. Most are in the southeast part of the state, and then we have 2 north of Concord, one in Laconia and one up in Coos.
Follow up?
Which ones are the ones in Coos, in northern?
That's the one operated by Coos County Family Health.
Additional follow up? Senator Waters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So looking back to slide 3, I see here 4,776 STI investigations and 580, Hep C through other potentially sexually transmitted infections. And I assume those are covered under other budgets?
So the investigations
Yeah.
that we do are probably executed through our infectious disease bureau. So those would be specifically where we get a report of an infectious disease or an outbreak, and we pursue to see if we can locate whether it's a facility, individual, whoever may be some vector of disease or concern. These services specifically serve, we had over 2,000 clients. It's actually 2,200 clients over the last fiscal year, and this would give those people access to testing and otherwise. So they would be a critical prong of that response effort.
So, if I may follow up, I mean, the reason I reference back to that is that the assumption would be if we cut these services, we'd see an increase potentially.
There would
STIs and so forth.
There's
that would
certainly our
then
concern.
Impact the work that you have to do or investigations and let alone the cost of treatment.
Yeah, I mean, certainly taking away care for 2,200 people or making them find care at what could be greater cost or greater distance would be a concern for us of more people potentially having infectious diseases. And again, obviously, in the instance of STIs, one person having an infectious disease presents the potential to a community or other individuals as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Senator
Chairman.
Rosenwald, you had a question?
Yes. I think a few budgets back, we looked at eliminating Title X funding. And the theory was that other providers would take on these patients. Do you see that possibility of other providers being able to absorb the patients from these 7 sites?
So I think there are 2 elements to the answer. So one would be there's obviously a concern in any element of our healthcare right now of providers absorbing additional patients. Everyone is aware it's challenging, to access providers of different types, and being a new client may be a challenge to access or get on the roster for a new provider. Certainly, if these funds were to go away, the department would do everything we can do to make sure that people are served, through the existing system or whatever system of care exists. I think the other concern would be access. Again, using COAS as the example, you really have one facility in, I can't quote the mileage of radius, but you have a very limited number of facilities for families or potential mothers who are planning a family to access the necessary care. There are not the volume of providers for maternal care services to serve everyone we have, let alone prospective families as well. So I think it would be extremely challenged. We're stretched already, having lost birthing facilities who also provide reproductive health care and fertility services. I think any further lessening of those services would have a real impact.
Follow-up?
Follow-up?
So you said the department would do everything it could to make sure these patients got care. What could the department do? Are you going to call up doctors and say, please take this patient?
So that's not a direct service we provide. I mean, one
I wouldn't think so.
one thing I might harp on just to kind of look at a couple of complementary issues we've already discussed would be through our SLRP program. So we could certainly, through the state loan repayment program, look at targeting more doctors and other care professionals that may work at existing facilities. I don't think that's going to be an instant solution to anything. I think ultimately, lesser access, fewer doctors, fewer sites is going to mean less care. The department's goal is always to maximize our partners, our healthcare community, and our healthcare partners do everything they can to see as many people as they can, but certainly they would feel the hit, and existing facilities would feel the crunch of more services and potentially either less time for patients or just the same number of patients and longer waits.
Senator Birdsall.
Thank you, and thank you for taking my questions again. So on the 4 contracts, what was the total cost of those contracts?
So the total cost of our whole, I'm sorry, I'm going to go through my various slides. So the total cost of our entire contracts should be noted in my notes.
Sorry.
No, it's, I'm
not trying to stump you.
No, and you shouldn't be. I apologize. I do not have that number in front of me.
I bet Mr. White is also looking that up. So if there's any additional questions, we'll come back to that.
I do.
Okay.
Yeah, follow. Well, I got in here late. Is this the reduced in the House budget by 3.7 million?
So that would be the entirety of budget. So that includes personnel on the state side. So that would be
okay.
more than just the contracted services. And if we're not able to get it in the course of the presentation, I'll be happy to follow up with you.
Do you know if the critical access care hospitals up north, have they closed their birthing centers?
So I cannot speak to every facility. I know we obviously had, we have had a number of them around the state. I think we're down to, I don't want to quote the wrong number. I believe we have, I'm looking over my shoulder for the number of birthing hospitals we currently have.
have been closed over time. Andrew
You need to be at a mic, Ms. Tully.
For the record, Trish Tilley, Associate Commissioner. In Coos County, Androscoggin is still providing labor and delivery services, and Littleton Hospital in Grafton is still providing labor and delivery services. If you think the real bulk of hospitals that have been closed sort of go across the middle of the state, if you think of it as almost Route 11 from Claremont all the way over to Rochester, there's a number of hospitals through that middle that are mostly critical access hospitals that have closed.
Follow-up? Would it be beneficial to, I know this is a bill that we've already voted on back there, but the critical care hospitals, we had a bill that would allow other entities like urgent care, birthing, if to open within that critical 15-mile radius. Would that be helpful to that, especially that strip?
Thank you. I mean, we're always open to encouraging more providers, and especially freestanding birth centers, often midwife-owned freestanding birth centers. I will have to say that there's just a volume problem once you get up north. The number of individuals is so small, you really almost have to subsidize that work in order to make it financially viable from a business level, but we're always open to more opportunities. You know, I think we've thought a lot around the Lebanon area after Alspec Day closed. Obviously, you've got Dartmouth that provides a number of, a large number of deliveries. There are opportunities to think about, but there's definitely a volume problem once you get north.
Thank you.
Additional questions? Seeing none?
So I appreciate the time and appreciate the questions. I had told Associate Commissioner Tilley I wouldn't draw on her expertise, but I'm at least 20 years short of her. So I give you the best answers, which unfortunately are her answers on this topic. But really appreciate your time, and again would just stress the potential impacts the loss of these funds, both federal and local, on our care and on outcomes for our maternal patients as well as children. I'll move forward to slide 10, which is representing our Bureau of Infectious Disease Control. Our Bureau of Infectious Disease Control is focused on the containment, surveillance, and monitoring of infectious disease, as well as response and investigation in the event of outbreaks. We also have our immunization division, which focuses on providing no-cost immunizations to families who want to access them around the state. We do have the loss of 6 classified positions in the budget, which would be absorbed largely, I believe, in our immunization section. The one change in the House budget I really want to draw attention to is Section 467 of HB2. This draws back on what is very similar language to what we saw in HB 357. HB 357 was recently recommended 5-0 in the Senate Health and Human Services Committee to be determined inexpedient to legislate on consent. That was determined because this bill would take away the rulemaking authority of the Commissioner of the Department of Health and Human Services for child care and school children. So right now, children attending school in New Hampshire are required to have 9 vaccinations. For child care, it's 10. That's of an 18 that are approved by ACIP, the federal oversight agency. This is an incredibly deliberative process that already uses the rulemaking process in JAILCAR. The division presented at that hearing and noted how deliberative it is. The reality is we haven't actually seen a change to our vaccine schedule since 2003 when varicella was added to the schedule. We're very concerned by this addition of policy that it would prevent flexibility. It would also take some of the expertise out of the process by taking away the work done by our team, by our medical professionals, and also just in ensuring that we have the most critical oversight and evaluation process for those vaccinations if and when they may be added to the schedule. The bill as written would also remove 3 vaccines from the vaccine schedule as of next June 30th, 2026, Hep B, varicella, chickenpox, as well as Hib. And so our concern would be once those are removed, you diminish the capability of schools to be able to require those vaccinations of children and potentially bring back added risk to our schools and childcare. I'll pause there if there are any questions about Biddick or otherwise.
Senator Rosenwald.
Looking at it from a different perspective, if somebody's child gets chickenpox, they're probably going to have to stay out of school for a few days, meaning that some parents will have to skip work. So shouldn't we also look at it from the productivity angle?
Yeah.
I know that's not your angle.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly look at community exposures from all angles, right? You know, any risk to health, whether it's children or adults, is a risk to the community, and certainly, you know, bringing back the risk of diseases that are largely contained, you know, would present risk to their parents, families, friends, grandparents, you know, however far out into the circle you want to go. But we would, you know, focus, you know, our concern on those children. To your point of wouldn't they spend some time at home, you know, they may not be at home for 1 to 2 days, so the exposure at school could be pretty extended, you know, depending on diagnosis or otherwise. It's important to note, and I didn't note, I apologize, in my intro, there are existing statutes allowing for both medical and religious exemptions. So that's another really critical point to make here, is that not only do we have these requirements, but for those families that do have other medical or religious concerns, there are existing exemption process as well as processes working through the legislature, I know this spring, about the potential for exemptions. So we believe the process as built has worked really well for the state.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Additional questions? Back to you.
All right. With that, I will move on to slide 11, which is our Bureau of Laboratory Services. Our public health laboratory functions to serve the public in various ways. I've spoken a little bit about the water lab. The water lab serves to allow private well owners to test their well at a fairly nominal fee. We also do radiological monitoring. We also work with the Department of Environmental Services to ensure that public beaches and other areas for recreation are available and healthy for children and families to swim in during the summer. So as we come up on our summer months, actually starting on May 1st, our volume of testing at the water lab actually about triples. So we're very excited for the summer and very excited by the work we do to keep the state safe for tourists and residents. We also do infectious disease testing, tuberculosis, arboviral diseases, tick-borne diseases, influenza, rabies, and others. And we also participate in both national and local monitoring programs for food. Our laboratory works closely with our Bureau of Infectious Disease and also our food protection program in the event of an outbreak of foodborne illness to locate any issues of concern and test any food of concern to try and isolate what may be at risk or contaminated. And then we also do just general monitoring to make sure that food on the shelves is safe to eat. We have identified food for recall. Just last year, we identified some apple juice that had additional arsenic levels or arsenic levels in excess of standard and acceptable levels and led to a multi-state recall. So we're very proud of the work we do in those national monitoring groups as well. Any questions about the lab?
Being none.
Just circling back to the question on the amount of funds for the family planning contracts. So we can certainly follow up with this in a grid. It may be easier. So there's 4 contracts. Each one has a different price limitation. We most recently extended them from January 1st of 2024 through June 30th of 2025, so an 18-month extension. The total funds were about $1.4 million, and of that, approximately 33% represented general funds, so about $462,000 in general funds. That's some really quick math that I was just doing behind the scenes, and we can follow up with exact numbers if that's needed.
No, that's good, thank you.
if they significantly change, please do follow up.
Will do.
Actually, I take that back.
Senator Burton.
What was the, you said it was 33% of general funds. What was the numerical number on that one? 400?
Yeah, about 462,000, but again, that's rough, quick math, very high level.
Okay, thank you.
Continue, please.
Thank you. So we're on to slide 12, which is our Bureau of Emergency Preparedness, Response, and Recovery. This was a bureau that we absorbed back in 2021 from our commissioner's office at the department level. We work in this bureau to make sure that we are responsive to emergency events and any medical or healthcare needs that arise from them. We work with the Emergency Operations Center and HSEM in our emergency support functions 6 and 8. So we man that capability 24/7 on behalf of the state to make sure any needs of our healthcare facilities are met. Should we have medical surge events? Should there be some other casualty event that requires a surge in resources? We're there to help coordinate amongst our partners in the healthcare industry to make sure that services are available. We also have our disaster behavioral health response team, which makes available behavioral health services. We coordinate volunteers to make sure that volunteers, either medical or behavioral health, are available in the event of emergencies to supplement existing local resources and resources we have in the care system. We also work closely with the Department of Safety on our REP program, Radiological Emergency Planning. We are responsible for a couple of functions. One, throughout our division, for the monitoring and response of potential health impacts, radiation levels, should there be a release or other events at the Seabrook power plant. And then we also make sure that unification centers are available for families or others should there be an evacuation required as a result of that kind of event. We also operate out of this bureau, our FEP, our Public Health Emergency Preparedness and Hospital Preparedness Grants, to make sure that we have resources to coordinate from across the healthcare industry and also our partners in the department. And that brings us to our last bureau and our last slide, slide 14. Our Bureau of Prevention and Wellness is focused largely on the prevention of chronic diseases. And this may be in the form of our cancer program, asthma. We have a chronic disease program that focuses on breast and cervical cancer prevention, as well as other services for patients. We have an oral health program, as well as our prescription drug monitoring program. In this area, I want to call out two significant changes that we saw in the House budget. The first is the elimination of our tobacco prevention program. Our tobacco prevention program is a partnership, or I should say a unification of federal and local resources. We have seen and heard the rumblings that the federal program is likely to be eliminated. We are in the final year of a budget period. We've actually just been given notice of a short-term cost extension through the summer, but do expect those federal resources to be depleted and go away sometime later in the summer. The potential loss of general funds would effectively eliminate our program. There would be no tobacco prevention program at the state level. Our current services largely focus on youth prevention, cessation support through our QUIT line, and then also our perpetuation of tobacco-free environments. That's through the enforcement of the Indoor Smoking Act, which is RSA 155/65. But we also make sure that our focus over the last several years has really been on teen smoking and teen vaping, and making sure that schools have access to resources, children and families have access to resources, and then through the QUIT line, anyone in the state who is considering, who is using tobacco or tobacco-related products has access to resources to quit. Are there any questions?
Senator Waters.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So on that one, I being a member of the Governor's Commission on Alcohol and Other Drugs, I'm really aware of what we've done with these programs. And so given the fact that we have seen some reduction over the years in the Youth Risk and Behavior Survey, but also if you go to talk to high schools and students in smoking, but there's been significant increases are coming along in vaping. And so without this funding, would you expect those rates the decline that had occurred and then the vaping to continue to accelerate if we don't have these programs?
So I think obviously we can't predict the exact trajectory, you know, with less access to information, less access to resources like the Quit Line, and less access to marketing and other materials that we distribute to schools and school nurses. We would certainly have a high concern that children wouldn't be getting the information they need that have led to some of those declines. You know, it's our expectation, obviously, when we execute a program, it's having an impact. As you said, we've seen those levels go down in the state, and we've been proud of those outcomes. Absent the resources, there's certainly a risk those outcomes could be reversed.
I could follow up. Follow up? Yeah, thanks. On the other cut there, just looking at 1263 of the budget, could you explain to me a little bit more? I mean, it looks like this is the rural health and primary care fund, the 300 and the 500,000 are taken from. So, but here it's called the loan fund. So I guess I didn't understand what we were at. So you got I mean, I see a $300,000 cut and a $500,000 cut in the budget under estimated rural health and primary care.
Yep. So that's actually, so I'm just going down the slide. That's our state loan repayment program.
Yeah,
and so those would be eliminating funds that are used to provide contracts for loan repayment to providers, behavioral health, medical providers, and dental providers. So various providers, depending on you know, the specific license you're pursuing, or excuse me, you have and are now practicing, would be able to access those funds through a 3-year contract if it's a full-time position, 2-year contract if you have a part-time position. Because of this lack of funds, we would have a lesser capability to bring on those providers.
It's a recruitment tool.
It's a recruitment tool, absolutely. And they work, those providers must work specifically in health designated shortage areas. Those may be rural or urban. They're around the state, much of our state, just by nature of our population and otherwise. And the care available are designated as healthcare shortage areas.
So if I may follow up. So this in particular, given that it is already really difficult, isn't it, for the hospitals in the North Country and these service areas to recruit at all? And this would likely make it less able to recruit, would you think?
So it's certainly a valuable tool. You know, the program has been in place since 2005. We have 111 providers currently in the program in various services, whether they be medical care, behavioral health, or dental. The dental program was an expansion in the past few years. So we were very pleased because dental care is obviously an area we have a great shortage across the state. You know, our concern, as you noted, the 300 and 500,000 across the 2 fiscal years, our real concern, or I should say our paramount concern of the 2 issues, is the inability to start any new contracts using the JUA fund. So we do have that fund, which was a one-time fund provided to the department, and we currently have almost $3 million available in that account. We would like, in the absence of general funds, if general funds are removed from the budget, we'd like to be able to initiate contracts. If we're not able to initiate any new contracts, that money will sit there effectively waiting for us to get back to a program. You know, it's a non-lapsing fund, and I believe it's dedicated to the department. So those funds are effectively isolated for 2 years, waiting for the next budget if we're not able to use them.
Additional questions?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I believe that was our final slide and covers the area. I really appreciate the thoughtful questions and the consideration. As I said, I'm really hopeful that we can have consideration of sorry.
And just one other thing to add when we're talking about public health and some of the other areas of the department. Ian was talking about the lab, and the lab charges certain water fees and testing. House Divisions 1 and House Divisions 2, they did increase fees in a number of different areas. Division 3 did not discuss the notion of increasing fees. We just wanted to put that out there. If there was any interest, we could follow up with information for the committee if so desired. But I just kind of wanted to highlight one of the differences that we saw within the division work during the House phase, and this is an area where we do have fees, and some of which haven't been increased in over a decade or more.
Are the fees you're talking about, do you have permission and rules to do those, or you would need legislation?
So it depends. Some of them are in rule and some of them are in statute. And so it would depend. We have our food protection rules that note the cost of our food licenses. We have various fees in our lab. Some are water lab fees, and others are for other tests.
Water lab fees, I think I've already taken care of.
You have been very helpful, so thank you for water lab fees, which will hopefully be moving into rule. And then we also
Get me the list and also provide it to the legislative budget office.
Absolutely.
Additional questions? All right, thank you very much.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Back to you again.
All right, so if you go backwards, we're going to go back to Hampstead Hospital and Residential Treatment Facility. It was just following New Hampshire Hospital. So just to contextualize everything for general awareness, the state acquired Hampstead Hospital and Residential Treatment Facility June 8th in 2022. At that time, the department entered into a 2-year sole source contract with a provider to help essentially run the operations there. The state did maintain executive oversight and then some financial and general management oversight of the facility. In July of 2024, the department did enter into an agreement with Dartmouth for clinical and prescribing services, at which time the department converted about 160 or 70 positions over to the state. And then in the summer of 2024, we prepared our agency budget. When we prepared our agency budget, we were looking at some of the historical revenue that we had derived and what the general fund need would be. We didn't have a lot of history, again, because Hampstead Hospital and Residential Treatment Facility was relatively new to the state. In the agency budget, we were requesting an additional $20 million of general funds each year. And since that point in time, back in December, the Governor and Executive Council approved an agreement between the state and Mary Hitchcock Memorial Hospital, whereby Mary Hitchcock or Dartmouth Health now has a lease agreement and they oversee the operations of Hampstead Hospital. And so because of that, if you skip ahead to slide 3, you will see that in state fiscal years 26 and 27, there is currently no budget. It's because the operating expenses have essentially been eliminated as a result of that new lease agreement where Mary Hitchcock is on site and operating the hospital. And so overall, you know, the general fund need went down significantly from the original agency request. And there is a unique issue that we do have, and Senate Bill 118 is addressing that right now, in the sense that the lease agreement has a provision that requires that the state, for every dollar of capital investment up to $3 million made by Mary Hitchcock, must match dollar for dollar in capital investment. And it's a 7-year lease agreement, so we don't know exactly when that investment is going to be made and when the state is going to need to make that payment. So as a result of that, the department had recommended that a dedicated account be established to allow a location for the lease revenue to be deposited to go for the next biennium to go up to that $3 million cap, so that we have those funds available, ready and waiting to support that obligation. And we worked with the Department of Justice on the agreement. It is certainly a unique provision, and SB 118 provides a solution to address that. And so that's not necessarily going to be showing up in the House operating budget before you. There's no longer an accounting unit for Hampstead Hospital in the House budget. But I did just want to provide some broader context on what we're seeing there. I know historically as well, there has been questions in the last budget, and then there was legislation in state fiscal year 24 on the payment to the town of Hampstead. When the state purchased Hampstead Hospital Residential Treatment Facility, they did lose, at the time, I think about $178,000 of tax revenue. We did make a payment this past year. I believe it was a little over $193,000. We've actually budgeted funds in the Office of the Commissioner and Accounting Unit 5000, I think it's Class 213, of $200,000 each year for payment to the town of Hampstead. So while there is no Hampstead budget here, those funds are accounted for elsewhere. And so that's a very high-level overview, and I'll pause for questions.
Senator Birdsall, I didn't even wait for your hand to go up.
I know. Thank you for taking my question. So, thank you very much for putting that in there. But it says page 624 of the budget, and I don't see it, because 624 is corrections. No, yes, corrections.
Well, the compare report that you have in front of you is page
Oh,
1346.
we need a couple mics turned off so that you can, there you go.
On the compare report that you have in front of you, it's page 1346.
Go ahead, Nathan. I'll check it out.
Sure. The page 624, that's the House budget as passed by the House, and it's class line 213 in the municipal payment line is where it shows up now at $200,000 a year.
What page was that again? I'm sorry.
1346.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Rosenwald.
What is the total yearly value of this lease with Dartmouth?
So I believe in the first year, the lease revenue was approximately $1.14 million. And then there's an escalator each year of roughly 3%. So over the 3 years, we will see that increase each year. Roughly about 1.2 million on average over the course of the lease.
Okay, can I
Follow up?
follow up? And you may not be the person to ask, but you're sitting there. Is Hampstead Hospital and the PRDF, are they currently, have they been rejecting any New Hampshire children recently?
I think we have the person to answer.
Great. Marissa Henn, Deputy Commissioner again. So your question is whether they have been rejecting any New Hampshire youth?
Yes.
So I think what I would say is that Hampstead Hospital, both under state leadership and oversight, and now since February 1st under Dartmouth Health, is prioritizing New Hampshire youth. So they are not allowed to admit non-New Hampshire youth unless there is essentially no wait list for New Hampshire youth, which has not occurred.
Oh,
Yes, ma'am.
but are there any children they have said we can't care for them?
So
I know there was one we talked
Yeah.
often about that kid.
What I would say is that there are the youth that are accepted to Hampstead have to go through a comprehensive admissions process that involves psychiatrists and psychologists to make sure that it's a clinically appropriate place for those youth. And so at times we have a number of meetings each week. The state stays very involved in facilitating cross-disciplinary conversations between providers and sometimes even inserting ourselves if there's sort of disagreement about whether or not Hampstead Hospital is the appropriate place for a given youth. So there are certainly times where, say, a young person is in an emergency department in New Hampshire and the doctors in that emergency department say this child needs Hampstead, and then upon further review and more case consultation, it turns out that that is not found to be an appropriate place. So there's definitely some of those gray area cases. So I can't say that no child has been denied admittance, but Hampstead remains deeply committed and involved in ensuring that that young person gets to an appropriate place of care. So it's not easy to give a single answer other than to say that they have a certain amount of latitude, but there's also strict criteria under the lease agreement and through a joint operating committee that I actually chair to ensure that the vulnerable youth of New Hampshire who need care receive it regardless of ability to pay or other circumstances.
Additional questions? think we're good. Do the senators have any additional issues to bring up today before we adjourn? Okay. My right-hand lady.
Mr. Chair, Senator Waters wanted to talk about a bill in regards to Senate Bill 59 that the committee had taken action on before and put on the table.
Yeah, right.
Let me give around
Yeah.
copies.
I mean, it's partly the larger question, Mr. Chairman, about what we do with the bills that we passed and tabled. And then I had thought maybe the procedure was that we would consider those to put in the budget. And I mentioned this one in particular because, as folks may recall, this is the one that was making certain changes to the existing recruitment and retention program that would let the dispatchers in and so on, and put a dispatcher on the advisor, the board that runs the program. And it would allow, using the existing funds, people to take not just credit, but certificate courses. There had been in the bill at the time that we got it in finance, a provision to add some funding to the police standards of training. And I had said, well, let's just take that out. And I think that because I was introducing a bill that you had already voted on it to table, that was the motion. And you may recall, we went on the floor and I said, well, you know, I've got an amendment, we can take that appropriation out, so it would just be the technical changes to the existing group and existing funding. So I didn't know what to do at this point. Are we gonna put it in Senate Bill 2 without that, you know, take out that funding and put the technical changes in, or what do you wanna do?
And that is certainly possible. The bill is on the table, so the bill actually could be removed from the table, and an amendment offered, I believe. I would check with Tammy on that. Or it could be put into the budget if the committee so desires. So I would think that the senators would want to review this. This is Senate Bill 59.
Yeah.
For any of the ones, I don't know if we mentioned that at the beginning of this conversation. So for right now, they have the bill in front of them, and so they can look at it and see what we want to do, and we can talk about it again tomorrow.
Thank you, and I just would note that, you know, I mean, I had the amendment when we hit it on the floor to take out the money and just do at the dispatchers and let them take non-credit courses. And I don't see how, if we take it off the table and pass it, I don't see how the House can deal with it. So that's why I had, you know, wanted to revisit this. And there's some other bills too, right, that we did pass and table, and I just didn't know, you know, and at the time I thought we were passing the table, so we would consider them in finance as for when we got to the budget. So we can talk, but that's the issue on this one in particular.
So we'll revisit this tomorrow.
Thank you.
Okay. Additional items to come before the committee? Oh, Senator Rosen.
So bills that are House bills that the Senate has already not passed, is your plan to take them out of House Bill 2?
When I talked about the House bills before that are included in House Bill 2, what I have said is that if we have the bill and it is in one of the policy committees, then when the policy committee has finished with it, we will decide what we want to do with it, okay? You know, some cases you may want to pass the bill, all right? And if you pass the bill, it doesn't even have to, you know, it can just be passed and sent back to the House and they'll do what they want with it, okay? So it would not have to go into the budget itself because it would already be there. Bills that And I'm told that there weren't any that were tabled or re-referred in the committee, the policy committee. They were all done in the finance committee that were re-referred or held. The notice did go out to the chairs of all the committees and said that I want the committee's opinion on those bills so that we can at least deal with them based on our opinion, because we have no policy on them, okay? The ones we passed, we do have a policy. They can be done, so.
But aren't we beyond crossover? So,
We do have some that we have ITL'd since that are currently in HB2.
And those, I imagine that we will take them out of HB2, but
that's where I'm going. And you know which one I'm talking about.
was it 548?
I don't know.
There's a few of them.
Okay.
Is what?
There's a few of them.
There are a few, but I'm speaking specifically of this circumcision ban.
I was not thinking of that one.
Oh.
Senator Waters.
Yeah. I had handed Karen a note in that we had House Bill 73, which is on the harm reduction. They passed House Bill 73. It came over. They put it in the budget as well, whatever. It came over. We have passed it in the Senate on the floor as of last week. So I had handed Karen a note saying, well, that's sections 396 to 403 of HB2. It's on the way to the governor's desk, so I would assume something like that we would just take out. There were no changes in the Senate.
If there were no changes in the Senate, and I didn't request it come to finance, then there's no real budget implications on it anyway.
So shouldn't we wait and see if the governor signs it?
Well, more than likely, the governor won't sign it by the time, because the processing through the House.
I understand that you will.
And through the Senate will more than likely take longer than we have. A heads up for you, I did start to review the FN report for this time, and there was a couple of things in there that we're going to take, even though they're below the $100,000 limit that I usually set, because they add positions and stuff. And so it would not make sense to pass that bill adding positions if we are cutting positions, in the budget in some of those departments. So again, I'm trying to use a little common sense in what I waive and what I don't. So, Senator Lang, you came back.
I've been listening in my office on YouTube, so
Okay.
it's easier than sitting here.
Senator Waters.
Yeah, one more.
Wow.
He's lurking.
We'll have to give him a demerit.
I can change those revenue numbers if you want.
So, just to, Mr. Chairman, I was just being new to finance, I'm wondering about, the last thing we were discussing about Hampstead Hospital and the potential $3 million to match the capital improvements and so on. So it's not in the budget. So how, if the House passes that or whatever they do to it, how do we then handle that? I mean, how does that funding get, it doesn't get in the budget then, or, I mean?
Well, there's several people that help me do all of that, and Mr. Riddle is just one of them,
Well, it's.
So that bill, what bill was that, Nathan? I'm sorry, I've forgotten. Was it 118? Okay.
184? No, I don't know.
118. Well, I need to refresh my memory on what Senate Bill 118 does. As with anything else, if the committee approves of that policy, you could also add it to House Bill 2. But again, like I said, I need to take a look and remind myself about.
Didn't we
I'm just
just
wondering how it gets done.
If it passes as a standalone, if passed the Senate, passed the House as a standalone, it would either come back to us for concurrence if they change it. If not, it'll go right to the governor, and we have to include it in the budget. We don't have to include it in the budget itself because it's already passed. It's already enacted.
Did we already have a hearing on that? I'm checking.
I think they have a hearing and like this week, an exec session on the 1st of May. I think I looked that up.
That's the House.
Yeah, on the House, yeah.
So. Yeah, because I think was that my bill? So, and I think I just testified last week on it.
Okay, so then the executive session is on the 1st, I think it said. So we'll find out.
Yeah, well,
Senator Rosenwald,
Thank you.
you beat Senator Lang by half a second.
Okay,
You're
so
just penalizing me for not being in a room.
in cases where we got a House bill and the Senate Policy Committee approved it, and we don't know whether the House will like those changes, but it saves us money, is that the sort of thing we should put the Senate's version into House Bill 2?
All of those things, if they're in House Bill 2 now, we're gonna talk about them, okay? So I can't, you can make all kinds of scenarios that you want. Some we'll take out of House Bill 2, some will leave in House Bill 2 and table the bill, whatever we will try to figure it out. And I probably will need some help figuring out if a bill comes through and it's in House Bill 2, so that I don't waive it and make it come back. So I think I've got somebody over there that'll help me with that. And we'll take it to finance and then we'll make the decision. Yes, sir.
So mine is the opposite question. Mine's about revenue adding to the budget.
Yep.
Do we carry bills, if the Senate's passed something, sent it to the House, and the House voted to pass it, but it hasn't made its way to the governor, do we carry that revenue in a surplus statement because it'll be available revenues for us? Is that what happens?
So generally, yes, the surplus statement does reflect bills that have a revenue or a spending impact. So you'll see those on the at the Schedule 2 adjustment. So yes, we would carry that.
So would we need to change anything on or we just book the revenue and just know that it's not accounted for in the Ways and Means revenue estimates because it's not current law, and that's what we base estimates on is current law,
Correct.
not proposed law?
Yes, yes. We would carry that on the surplus statement, and you would get to reflect that in your budget.
Any last nickels?
what? Nickel?
Yes, that's an old expression. You're probably not old enough to know.
It's gone up to a quarter now, though.
Our business of the day being complete, we are adjourned.